Chapter 1263. Who are you? The foot of the mountain of Tao was bustling with activity. Whether it was the elders of the Daotian Academy or the Azure Heaven's prides, they all stared at the young man and woman in front of them in shock. Suddenly, Ling Xiao seemed to have thought of something. He frowned and exclaimed softly. Beside him, one of the Heaven's prides was stunned. Then, he exclaimed, I know him. His name is Yang Bian. Yes, when he ascended to the Supreme Tao, he reached the 800th step. Yes, I remember now. I was wondering why I didn't see him during the lecture today. So he was up to no good. I think he and Zhang Heba were flirting with each other in the Tao Heaven City. I told you he was up to no good. Suddenly, realization dawned on everyone's faces. They were certain that Yang Yuan had something to do with the elder's death. Where were you just now? The Tao Heaven Academy's master frowned. Based on the way the elder died, he was most likely killed in one hit. With the strength of these two juniors, it would be difficult for them to do that. Could it be that these two were just bait and the real culprit had already escaped? Academy Master, Yang Yuan's lips trembled. The Taoist rhyme that flowed around the Tao Heaven Academy's master made him feel as if he had fallen into a swamp. In fact, one look from the human race's saint was enough to make Yang Yuan tremble. He felt as if he had been seen through. Speak. The Tao Heaven Academy's master stood with his hands behind his back. He ignored the Heaven's pride's discussion behind him. Yang Yuan, on the other hand, gritted his teeth. He seemed to have made up his mind. Suddenly, he lifted his head and looked at the Tao Heaven Academy's master. Academy Master, don't you think bullying two juniors will damage your reputation as a saint? Right at that moment, a gray-clothed old man suddenly walked over from the foot of the mountain. The old man walked with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression was indifferent and there was not a single strand of aura around him. It was as if he was in harmony with the heavens and earth. The Tao Heaven Manor's master was slightly taken aback when he saw the person who had come. His eyes flickered with a clear light, and he seemed rather surprised. You, Manor Lord, you have a good memory. The gray-robed old man nodded. Disciple Yue. I haven't seen you for 10,000 years, but you're even more impressive than before. These two are your disciples? The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor nodded slightly. He had some impression of the old man before him. If he remembered correctly, this person had also left his name in the 3 trials. However, what really made Lord Daotian remember him was not his reputation, but his talent. Extreme Tao of killing, unparalleled killing intent. Back then, the young man had entered the Tao through killing. Every attack he made had no spiritual power at all. It was silent, just like how he had been for thousands of years, without a trace. However, only those who had truly faced him would understand how terrifying this silent killing intent was. Manor Lord, I've made a fool of myself in front of you. Everything they did today was under my orders. I will bear all the responsibility. Yu Yi's expression was indifferent. He was not surprised at all. Ever since Xia Zhiming had sent him a message, he knew that what the two of them had done would cause trouble. But now it seemed that he had underestimated the courage of Xia Zhiming and her husband. However, when he thought about what her father had done back then, Yue felt a little more at ease. He did not doubt the character of this young disciple and Yang Yuan at all. Everything they had done would not exceed the bounds of morality. You will bear all the responsibility? Does that mean you killed the guardian elder? The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor frowned slightly and nodded. That method of killing with one blow indeed seemed to have come from Yue. The guardian elder? Yu Yi's eyes trembled slightly. He turned to look at Xia Zhiming meaningfully. Given his strength, he was naturally no match for the Lord of Tao Heaven Manor. However, he owed Xia Zhiming a favor. Yue, in my impression, you're not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. Tell me what's going on. The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor waved his hand, and removed the formation on the mountain of the way. He watched as Yu Yi walked up to Yang Yuan and Yi Qingtang. What did the two of you do in the scripture depository? Master, Xia Zhiming pursed her red lips. When she saw the flash of disappointment in her master's eyes, she felt depressed and inexplicably sad. However, her spirit was now under Ling Zhao's control. She could not even muster the slightest thought to resist. It's fine. Young people all make mistakes. Furthermore, I believe in you, both of you. Yu Yi raised his head and glanced at Yang Yuan, who was standing side by side with Xia Zhiming. His eyes surged with divine light. Boy, from today onward, I will be handing Zhiming to you. Master, Zhiming, I know that you have a lot of questions in your heart. However, listen to your master. It is still not time for you to know about these things. Forget about them. Properly cultivate with Yang Yuan. After saying those words, Yu Yi no longer hesitated. He raised his foot and walked toward the Lord of Tao Heaven Manor. Buzz. The mountain wind whistled. Tens of thousands of feet of dust swept through heaven and earth. Yu Yi was surrounded by a profound radiance. It was a sort of grayish-white spirit power that could not be seen upon closer inspection. As he took a step forward, a strand of killing intent quietly emerged. Facing the countless experts of the Daotian Academy alone, Yu Yi remained completely unperturbed. His eyes were calm. Seeing this scene, the Lord of Tao Heaven Manor started to frown even more. From Yu Yi's reaction earlier, he was able to tell that his master simply had no idea what the two of them had done in the Daotian Academy. Yet, he still chose to believe in his disciple without hesitation. He was even willing to sacrifice his life for her. The path of immortality was unfathomable. It was difficult to determine what was good or evil. However, in the end, only by being powerful would one be able to protect everything and reign supreme. Sometimes the evil one saw might not be evil. As for the righteousness one knew, it might not be righteousness. Chaotic times had arrived. In the end, the one who would seize the fortune of the world would be the god of the mortal realm. Go, capture those two people of the younger generation. The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor turned around and glanced at the four hall masters beside him. He spoke with a calm voice. Yes. Buzz. However, the instant the four of them took a step forward, a pitch-black curved blade suddenly appeared in Yu Yi's hand. He tossed it into the sky. Immediately, boundless killing intent surged forth. Like a primal chaos demonic mist, it transformed into all sorts of divine images. The figures of the four hall masters were immediately blocked in the void. Their eyes flickered with shock and astonishment. At this moment, the four of them had a feeling that if the old man before them had wanted to kill them earlier, they would have been dead by now. Lord Tao Heaven Manor, Yu Yi did not come here today to kill anyone. I only hope that Lord Tao Heaven Manor will be magnanimous and give them a chance to turn over a new leaf. I've already said that I will bear this sin alone. Yu Yi slowly walked out of the mist of killing intent. He stood tall in the sky and looked down at the crowd. Although his body could not be considered majestic, he gave off an indescribable feeling of being able to suppress heaven and earth. Chapter 1264. This is an unforgivable sin. The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor shook his head slightly. The moment he stepped out, his figure turned into a clear radiance and broke through the layers of fog. Although Yu Yi's cultivation had just reached the level of a heavenly sovereign, and he was far from the Lord of Tao Heaven Manor, his attacks were the true killing intent of the world. Moreover, as time passed, this killing intent seemed to have become more and more dull. It was frightening. Dark clouds suddenly gathered in the originally clear sky. In a short while, heavy rain poured down, annihilating all the clouds of dust. In the sky, two figures faced each other from a distance. The spiritual power in front of them was as vast as the sea, shocking the world. Yu Yi, let me ask you one last time. The Lord of Tao Heaven Manor frowned as he looked at the sudden rain. he felt a faint chill in his heart. Buzz. However, before he could finish his sentence, Yui suddenly disappeared in the rain. The extreme killing intent surged along with the rain and spread for thousands of miles, enveloping the countless figures at the foot of the Path Mountain. Manor Master, you can kill my disciple. Today, I have no choice but to start a massacre. A low and misty voice like thunder fell from the sky. At this moment, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Wherever the rain fell, it was filled with killing intent. Vaguely, the entire world seemed to be filled with killing intent. No one dared to make a move. In fact, even the 4 hall masters were terrified. They felt as if they were on the verge of death. You're not worthy. However, the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor did not show any emotion on his face. He looked up at the sky, and in the next moment, there seemed to be thousands of rays of light in his eyes. They instantly broke through the rain and imprisoned the world. The vast clear radiance spread across 90,000 miles of the void like the primordial fog. The heavy rain that had been falling was completely isolated above everyone's heads. It could no longer fall. A 9th-grade heavenly sovereign. Even with Ling Zhao's temperament, he felt a chill run down his spine when he saw the magnificent Wei Aura divine armament. He was indeed a saint of the human clan. With such combat power, he could crush all enemies. No evil could invade him. Go! Xia Zhimeng and Yang Yuan suddenly heard a shout. The two of them did not dare to hesitate. The moment they took a step forward, the talismans in their hands flashed and their figures suddenly disappeared. The Lord of Dao Heaven Manor frowned slightly and struck out with his palm. Immediately, the void trembled and the great path was obliterated. As for the forest where Yang Yuan and Xia Zhimeng were, it was almost instantly reduced to dust. Even the area in an area of 50 kilometers seemed to have been restrained by a strand of surging divine energy, causing space to collapse while strong winds swept through the area. Puchi. With their cultivation, it was impossible for them to withstand the attack of a heavenly sovereign. At this moment, he felt as if all the bones in his body had shattered. Even his internal organs and dantian showed signs of shattering. Right at this moment, the sound of wind howling could be heard from thousands of miles away. The curtain of rain that had been isolated from the world by the Dao Heaven Manor's master had strangely turned scarlet. It was as if the netherworld sea had descended from the heavens, and it carried with it an unparalleled murderous aura as it crashed down. Hum! As the blood sea rose and fell, a figure seemed to appear with the waves. In his hand, the black saber slashed down and turned into a dazzling saber radiance. It was piercingly cold and shocking as it slashed toward the people at the foot of the mountain. Wherever the saber radiance passed, the heavenly might was vast and mighty, and it directly tore the void neatly. It was like a demonic abyss that sucked people in, suppressing a heart-palpitating chill. With Yu Yi's cultivation, naturally, he was no match for the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor. Therefore, at this moment, he did not face the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor head-on. Instead, he chose to attack the group of disciples and Qing Tsang's supreme talent. Since the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor was known as the human tribe sage, he was naturally concerned about the human tribe's legacy. Once all the supreme talents of the current generation died at the foot of Dao Mountain, the Qing Tsang sacred ground would completely become a place of evil. Humph! As expected, when the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor saw Yui attack, a cold look appeared on his face. Dao inscriptions appeared wherever his gaze passed. In the end, he did not dare to hesitate and turned to face the saber radiance. Let's go! In the void, Yang Yuan gritted his teeth fiercely. All the bones in his body shattered, but he did not dare to hesitate at all. He disappeared with Xia Zhimeng. Boom! The Lord of Dao Heaven Manor and Yu Yi finally collided. Dazzling divine radiance and a sea of blood filled the sky, destroying everything in its path. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the two figures standing proudly at the peak of the sky with a clear gaze. With Yu Yi here, the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor would not be able to escape for a while. However, Ling Xiao still wanted to know the secret in Yu Yi's soul sea, so today he could not die. In a fight between two heavenly sovereigns, it was difficult to determine the winner in a short time. As long as Ling Xiao kept the demonic bone in his pocket, he could easily lure the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor away from this place. At that time, Yu Yi would probably be severely injured by the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor, and Ling Xiao would only need to summon the corpse puppet of the Patriarch of the Foliaceae. With Gui Ying's help, the slaying shrine elite would not be able to escape, killing 4 birds with 1 stone, step by step. Even the timing of these people's appearance was carefully calculated by Ling Xiao, and there was not a single mistake. At the same time, in the divine cave, Zhang Jiuji stared blankly at the spiritual fog of Taoist rhymes that had suddenly solidified in front of him. He felt a chill rising from the bottom of his feet and spurting out from the top of his head. Especially when he felt the heavy breathing behind him, Zhang Jiuji swallowed a mouthful of saliva and slowly turned around. In the next moment, his body trembled, and his face turned ghastly pale. About 10 feet in front of him, a huge azure dragon head stood quietly in the void. Black runes ran through his dark brown eyes. He looked ancient, ferocious, and domineering. Gulp. Zhang Jiuji's current mood could no longer be described as hopeless. In front of such a 100,000-year-old dragon vein, his body was as small as an ant. Zhang Jiuji did not doubt that if the dragon vein opened its mouth, it could easily swallow him and the entire space. Senior Inu, what should we do? The Dao Heaven Manor Lord must have used a magical seal to connect the dragon vein to the immortal platform. You must have awakened the dragon vein when you touched it. Inu's voice came from Zhang Jiuji's Sea of Soul. Zhang Jiuji narrowed his eyes and looked closely. As expected, he saw a wisp of golden light hidden under the scales between the green dragon head's eyebrows. It was extraordinary. Senior, now roar. Before Zhang Jiuji's voice trailed off, the dragon vein's fierce eyes suddenly bloomed with scarlet light. Then, it suddenly opened its huge mouth and let out an ear-piercing dragon roar. Boom! Boom! The entire world instantly collapsed. The dragon vein soared into the air and bit at Zhang Jiuji. Vast divine might crushed the void, and even this small world seemed to emit bursts of cracking sounds. Hum! Monstrous demonic qi surged around Zhang Jiuji. Inu's figure appeared in the sky and turned into a black light that enveloped the young man. Go! Chapter 1265. Roar! The dragon's roar caused the surroundings to collapse. Cracks as deep as an abyss spread out in the void, penetrating the entire world. Even with Inu's protection, Zhang Jiuji felt his body and mind tremble. His blood was boiling, and every inch of his skin and flesh seemed to be shattered by the dragon's roar. Senior, let's go. This dragon vein is too strong. With my current strength, I can't compete with it at all. Also, the Daotian Academy's master will definitely sense the fluctuations here. Inu's tone was solemn. She wrapped Zhang Jiuji with demonic energy and fled toward the entrance of the small world. Senior. Zhang Jiuji's heart was stifled at this moment. The sky demon's remains were right in front of him, but he could only watch it get farther and farther away from him. Apart from his injuries and the sudden demon name, he didn't seem to have gained anything from this trip to the Daotian Academy. Good fortune, Saint Body? I'll throw you away, Jiuji. Calm your mind. The demon bone is here. When you're strong enough, you can take it by force. As long as there's life, there's hope. Inu sighed softly. The loneliness in her voice didn't seem to be fake. Just now, she had received Ling Zhao's message to take Zhang Jiuji away from here. Originally, she thought that after this trip to the academy, her master would cut off this little Jiuji so that she could return to her master's side. But now, it seemed that she had thought too much. Obviously, A young man with the good fortune saint body was far more useful than just finding the demon bone. Now, Zhang Juji's golden fingers were all under Ling Xiao's control. With Yin Yu's secret guidance, there was no chance for him to struggle on his path of cultivation. Even if he encountered good fortune in the future, it would just be his duty as a treasure-hunting mouse. Okay. Finally, Zhang Juji didn't hesitate anymore. His body suddenly bloomed with spiritual light, and he flew away. However, with his speed and Yin Yu's secret help, even an ordinary supreme powerhouse would find it difficult to stop him. But the dragon vein was too big. It was so big that it could extend out of its body and fill the entire small world. Therefore, no matter how Zhang Juji used his spiritual power, the green dragon head was always several dozen feet behind him. Damn it. Senior, if this continues, it will catch up to us. Sensing the dragon's aura circulating around him, Zhang Juji felt chills running through his body. He felt a constant fear of being devoured. 9 Extreme, that divine lightning! Inu let out a cold shout as the evil ghost aura around her surged and turned into a 1,000-meter-long spirit seal that slammed down on the dragon vein. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a look of determination appeared on Zhang Juji's face. As his hand seals changed, the ghost tribulation demonic thunder that he had merged with suddenly appeared and hung above his head. At this moment, this demonic lightning was not condensed from the power of lightning. Instead, it was the manifestation of its origin. Within it, the might of thunder surged, and the Taoist rhymes were flourishing. Even if it was only a single strand, it caused the world to lose its color, its spiritual radiance to be extinguished, and no evil could invade it. Zhang Juji raised his head and looked at the spirit seal that was easily destroyed by the dragon vein. His eyes were dark and gloomy. Among the trump cards he had, apart from the 9 Sun Stupa, this divine lightning was the strongest. However, this divine lightning was something that he had risked his life to fuse with his body. If he were to leave it here, he would feel as if he had suffered a double loss after trying to gain the bride. 9 Extreme. Stop hesitating. Otherwise, once the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion arrives, we will definitely die. Inu let out a hoarse shout as she stretched out her hand and caught the ghost tribulation demonic thunder in her palm. A bolt of lightning suddenly bloomed and shone brightly in the sky. In just a breath's time, it surged into a vast ocean and shrouded the dragon vein. Let's go! Inu's figure flew out and shrouded Zhang Juji again. She instantly disappeared from the spot. At the same time, Ling Xiao stepped out of the void above the divine foundation. He looked at the demonic bone in front of him with a faint smile on his face. With the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion's scheming mind, how could he not have set up a backup plan on the divine foundation? Although the dragon vein in front of him was not very intelligent, the spiritual vigor and Taoist rhyme it contained were comparable to that of a heavenly sovereign. Of course, with the trump cards Ling Xiao currently had, it was not impossible for him to stop it. However, that would definitely delay him. Once the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion was attracted, it would be extremely troublesome. Moreover, Zhang Juji had fled. With the demonic qi outside Inu's body as a bait, the blame would be perfectly placed on him. From the beginning until the end, Ling Xiao had merely concealed himself in the shadows, and he'd taken all the fortune for himself. However, it was a pity that the dragon's vein was too huge. It would take a lot of effort to capture it. Now, it seemed that he had to give up for the time being. Ling Xiao looked coldly in the direction where Zhang Juji had disappeared. The boundary breaker talisman in his hand quietly shone with a mysterious light as he stored the demonic bone on the divine foundation into his ring. At this moment, the dragon vein that was chasing after Zhang Juji suddenly stopped and turned to look at Ling Xiao. Boom! The spiritual vigor and Taoist rhyme that had been stagnant suddenly turned into a tidal wave and shrouded the entire small world at a terrifying speed. Ling Xiao felt a force that was 10,000 times more terrifying than before descending from the sky. It sealed the world and isolated the entire space, including the entire St. Peak, from the rest of the world. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. Thousands of soul runes appeared in his eyes, and the demonic qi around him soared into the sky. But, no matter how hard he tried, he could not sense the aura of the realm. It was only at this moment that Ling Xiao realized that this was the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion's true trump card. Once the demonic bone was touched, the dragon vein's qi would seal the space. There was no way to break it. This was especially so for the dragon vein in front of him. It was far more terrifying than the 10 veins in Ling Xiao's realm combined. With this primordial dragon vein sealing the void, even a heavenly sovereign would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As expected of the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion, Ling Xiao lifted his head and looked at the terrifying dragon shadow that had broken free from the divine thunder's restraint. For the first time, a hint of seriousness appeared in his eyes. Even though he had calculated every step of the action, the person, the time, and the cause, it seemed flawless. However, these old things that had lived for 100,000 years had unpredictable means. Originally, Ling Xiao had planned to enter the realm after Yin Yu and Zhang Juji escaped from this place and completely escape from this situation. However, it seemed that he could only use the boundary-breaking talisman to break free from the shackles of this place and return the way he came. However, if he did that, he would be exposed. After all, even Ling Xiao was not confident that he could escape the spiritual probing of a 9th-grade heavenly sovereign in front of everyone. Roar! Just as Ling Xiao's eyes were gloomy, the dragon vein opened its huge mouth angrily and came crushing down from the sky. In an instant, the entire world fell into darkness. The Tao runes flickered and revealed an endless vastness. Chapter 1266. Buzz! The wind and clouds shook and the world became dark. The dragon vein opened its huge mouth furiously and sealed the space within 1,000 feet around Ling Xiao with a force that encompassed the entire world. Vast amounts of spirit qi poured down in torrents, cleansing and erasing everything. Even with Ling Xiao's strength, he felt a deep sense of fear when facing the ancient dragon vein. After hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation, the dragon vein's power was comparable to that of a real azure great demon. Moreover, the Lord of Daotian Prefecture had used his spiritual energy as a contract to set up this inescapable trap. It was as if he was suppressed by the dragon vein's sacred energy. Even with Ling Xiao's means, it would not be easy to get rid of it. However, just as Tao patterns flowed in his eyes and he was about to escape, the space in front of him suddenly rippled. At first, Ling Xiao thought that the Lord of Daotian Prefecture had arrived. A chill rose in his heart. He held the demonic blade horizontally in his hand. Even the black robe around him was flowing with demonic intent. He was about to reveal his true form, but only when a petite figure in a black dress slowly stepped out from within and walked towards the dragon vein did the seriousness in Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly turn cold. Feng Ling! Buzz! Suddenly, a wisp of aura fluctuated between heaven and earth. As for the originally vast and boiling spiritual might Taoist rhyme, it seemed to have solidified as it came to a stop. Absolute silence. The entire space was as quiet as a dead land. Feng Ling stood in front of the dragon vein's forehead. She extended a slender finger and gently tapped the dragon vein's forehead. You must be in pain too. At this moment, her voice was soft and ethereal, but it was inexplicably sorrowful. To Ling Xiao's surprise, the dragon vein seemed to understand her words. It nodded slightly. Even its dark brown eyes seemed to show a hint of pain. Then I'll send you to a place where no one will bully you, okay? Feng Ling smiled faintly. Light surged around her, and her hair fluttered. In a daze, Ling Xiao felt that Feng Ling had grown up. Her body became more and more slender, and her back was graceful. Even her delicate and flawless face had a hint of maturity. Buzz! The dragon vane nodded again, causing the world to buzz. At the same time, Feng Ling's fingertip emitted an extremely dazzling spiritual light that completely obliterated the divine armament's fluctuation between its brows. Let's go. Feng Ling lowered her head to look at Ling Xiao. Her bright red lips were exceptionally enchanting, and there was a beautiful dimple at the corner of her mouth. All right, Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. At this moment, he could feel that the shackles of this world had suddenly disappeared. Even the spiritual light that originally covered the world gradually dimmed at this moment, until it completely disappeared. Buzz! With a thought from Ling Xiao, a huge shadow suddenly appeared at the end of the world, covering everything. Ling Xiao, Feng Ling, and the dragon vane immediately disappeared. The space that was originally filled with spiritual energy instantly quieted down. Apart from the immortal foundation that stood tall in the void and emitted a bright glow, there was not a single ripple in the entire world. It was like a dead zone, and it was filled with despair-inducing loneliness. At the same time, at the foot of the mountain of Tao, above the void, patches of bloody mist fell from the sky. Many Tao runes intertwined and formed, shattering the world. In the clouds, two figures faced each other from afar. Spiritual light shone around them, making them look like two gods from the 9 heavens, unbeatable. However, compared to before, Yui looked more haggard now. One of his arms had been shattered during the battle. Blood dyed his robe red, but there was no emotion on his face at all. On the other hand, the head of Dao Tian Manor was still calm and indifferent. In the crowd, Ling Xiao's eyes were filled with purple qi, but his expression was calm. At a certain moment, determination flashed across Yu Yi's face. Endless murderous intent began to surge around him. Vaguely, there seemed to be a god stepping on the world, piercing through the ancient times. The vast murderous aura formed thousands of avatars. Mist rose, and the sky was destroyed. A beam of black light shot out, intending to slash at Lord Daotian. Yui, stop! The Lord of Dao Heaven Manor looked indifferent. He pushed his hand forward and locked down the void. However, at this moment, extreme shock flashed across his face. Then, under Yu Yi's astonished gaze, he turned around and looked toward the peak of Dao Mountain. At that location, a demonic figure suddenly appeared. With a terrifying speed, it streaked across the sky and fled. Demon! The head of Dao Tian Manor shouted. He turned around and glared at Yu Yi. So, you're on the same side. It's Zhang Heba. It's Zhang Heba. Someone in the crowd suddenly exclaimed. Yu Yi's eyes were filled with confusion. He swung the ancient sword in his hand, but his figure disappeared from the spot. Demon! Don't run! The head of Dao Tian Manor shouted. The moment he took a step forward, he abandoned Yu Yi and chased after Zhang Juji. At this moment, he could sense that the ancient dragon vene's aura had disappeared. This also meant that the demonic bone that he had suppressed in the Dao Mountain must have been obtained by this evil demon. Zhang Heba. He had heard of this name recently. It was said that a demon had appeared in Dao Tian City. He claimed to be an old subordinate of the Sky Demon. This young man with the surname Zhang was the descendant of this demon. Now, it seemed that whether it was Yu Yi or Yang Yuan, they were all accomplices of this devil. Killing the temple guardian elder was just a way to attract his attention so that they could steal the devil bone. However, the only thing that puzzled the head of Dao Tian Manor was that the ancient dragon vene's combat strength was comparable to a heavenly sovereign. Even if it was not very intelligent, with the last backup plan that he had set up, it should not have been killed so silently. But just now, why didn't he feel the slightest ripple? How could an old subordinate of the Sky Demon be so terrifying? I told you that Yang Bian and Zhang Heba are on the same side. Everything is connected. The nature of this demon is simply too terrifying. Sigh. I did not expect so many unforeseen events to occur during this trip to the academy. The geniuses of the various sects sighed one after another. However, Ling Zhao's eyes did not waver. This trip to the academy had come to a perfect end. With Zhang Juji's providence and the power of the good fortune Saint Physique, the head of Dao Tian Manor would most likely not gain anything if he went after him. As for Yue, who had escaped with serious injuries, he would definitely look for Xiaojimeng. Next, he only needed to capture this heavenly sovereign and then prepare to head to the Killing God Temple. Ling Xiao was rather interested in this force. After all, what he wanted to do now required him to hide behind the scenes. Although Layered Shadow's methods were terrifying, it would be difficult for her to nurture a sect in a short period of time by herself. As for Ling Xiao, he only needed to control the Killing God Temple to save a lot of time and energy. Xiachen, there is no need to thank me. I will avenge you. Chapter 1267. In the Heavenly Palace, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the terrifying dragon vein at the end of the world. At this moment, Feng Ling was standing on its head, whispering something to it. Only when the dragon vein roared at the sky and bent down, turning into a towering mountain, did Feng Ling step out and appear beside Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao. Yes. Once again, the little girl in front of him, who had no spiritual energy at all, shocked Ling Xiao. In front of her, the ancient dragon vein was like a docile kitten, harmless and at her mercy. It was as if she was born with an aura that could suppress everything. Neither the ancient dragon vein nor the blood of an immortal god could break her majesty. But she had no cultivation at all. I have an agreement with the Azure Dragon. I will take root in this world in the future. You are not allowed to hurt it. Feng Ling's tone was cold, and there seemed to be a hint of sadness between her brows. Azure Dragon? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. This was the first time he had heard of this name. Even the saint realm of the Ling clan didn't know about this secret. Many spirit veins have been born in the 9 heavens and 10 land. Some spirit veins have collapsed and not condensed, while some spirit veins can transform into dragons. However, there are differences between dragon veins. For example, the dragon veins you found in the Xingzhou continent were ordinary dragon veins, while this dragon vein is the Azure Dragon vein. Its power is terrifying, and once it gains intelligence, it can rival a sovereign. Feng Ling's eyes flickered with an inexplicable vicissitude. At this moment, Ling Xiao could clearly sense a decaying aura from her. It was like the everlasting ancient trees and bluestones of the 9 heavens. They were born with the world and had experienced countless eras, but they did not die. In fact, Ling Xiao did not even feel such a strange fluctuation from demon venerable Chongyu. Inexplicably, Ling Xiao's heart became more and more confused. Where did Feng Ling come from? Why did she appear in the ancient Glaze Pagoda? Was it Yi Luoyun or the ancient gods of the immortals who imprisoned her here? Azure Dragon? Ling Xiao nodded slightly and looked into the distance. He saw a bright light above the dragon vein. There was a spiritual aura that transformed into clouds, nourishing all living beings and opening up the world. Moreover, with this Azure Dragon vein here, the spirit energy in the entire region seemed to have been revived. It was boundless and surging without end, and it was far more magnificent than an ordinary holy ground. Amen. Above the Azure Dragon are the Divine Dragon, Sacred Dragon and Desolate Dragon. However, with the current spirit chi in the mortal realm, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult for a dragon vein to evolve to that level. Feng Ling shook her head and smiled. She suddenly turned to look at Ling Xiao. There seemed to be a wisp of golden radiance flowing within those pitch-black eyes. Ling Xiao, you've found the 5th demon bone, right? Yes. Ling Xiao waved his hand and a crystal-clear jade bone appeared. The charm that flowed on it was comparable to the most mysterious mantras in the world. Ling Xiao, I might have to leave for a while. Feng Ling sighed and reached out her hand. A pitch-black demon bone immediately appeared in front of Ling Xiao. It was a spine. The sixth demon bone. Seeing this, Ling Zhao's face was filled with surprise. He had long guessed that there was a demon bone sealed on the 9th level of the Glaze ancient pagoda. However, he still did not understand why Feng Ling would hand over the demonic bone to him at this time. Leave for a while? Where is she going? That's right. This is the last demon bone. Feng Ling suddenly smiled. Ling Xiao, when we meet next time, remember to fulfill your promise. Where are you going? I don't know either. However, there are some things that I have to figure out. Ling Xiao. Feng Ling looked at Ling Xiao meaningfully. Be careful. The 9 heavens are much more complicated than you think, especially the human race. Just like the first time he had met her, Feng Ling didn't hesitate to leave. She left Ling Xiao with a dazzling silhouette before disappearing on the spot. Ling Xiao did not ask her to stay. He just stood there quietly and watched the petite figure in black disappear. He did not speak for a long time. From Feng Ling's words, Ling Xiao could guess that she must have awakened a part of her memory. However, it was not complete. It was obvious that there was a huge conspiracy behind this. However, Ling Xiao did not know whether this conspiracy was against Feng Ling or the Sky Demon. The reason why this girl did not leave was probably because she wanted to wait for him to find the 5th demon bone so that she could give him the last one personally. It was like a ritual. Or it was just an excuse not to leave. Ling Xiao frowned slightly. He kept the 2 demon bones in his universe ring and looked up at the void. There, the wind and thunder were boiling. A black-clothed phoenix figure was sitting quietly. He did not know when, but when he saw her, Ling Xiao felt an inexplicable sense of security. This feeling made him feel a sense of belonging to this strange world for the first time. It was as if he was accepting his current self from the bottom of his heart. He was no longer the soul that had crossed over. Why was the human race more dangerous in Feng Ling's eyes? Ling Zhao's eyes were filled with soul light. He felt an inexplicable chill. Could it be that the fall of the Sky Demon was not only caused by the immortals and ancient gods, but also by the human race? It was getting more and more interesting. These layers of fog were like shackles that imprisoned Ling Zhao's body. Sometimes he would even feel slightly uneasy. It was as if everything in front of him was an illusion. His rebirth and his rise in the upper realm seemed to be deliberately arranged by someone. That big hand hidden behind all the worlds seemed to be able to easily crush him. This feeling was terrifying and even powerless. I'm still not strong enough. Ling Xiao shook his head and chuckled. With Gu Chaoxiai here, he would not easily fuse with the demon bones for the time being. Even if he had already guessed that the true destined woman of the Azure continent might have already known his biggest secret. However, it was as if there was a tacit understanding. They did not mention a word. When she stepped into the Saint Realm, Ling Xiao should also prepare to forge his physical body. Then, he would use the divine tribulation as a contract to forge a supreme foundation. However, before that, it was time to harvest the leek that was Yang Yuan. The reincarnation heavenly abode was the true creation of the Azure continent. As for the secret behind this force, it could only be completely revealed when he found the ancient divine abyss. However, no matter what, the power of reincarnation was the ultimate power of the 9 heavens. If he could master it, the upper limit of his immortal path would definitely be increased. Buzz! At the peak of the Tao Mountain, in the lecture hall, all the Azure Continent prodigies and Academy disciples had returned to the hall under the lead of the Academy elders. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with worry. Obviously, they were frightened by the demonic intent outside Yu Yi and Zhang Juji. Before this, who would have thought that these demons would have the guts to be so unscrupulous in the Daotian Academy, the sacred land of the human race? Chaos had arrived. Chapter 1268. Buzz. Spiritual light surged in the hall and Taoist rhymes filled the air. The figure of the Daotian prefecture master suddenly appeared in front of everyone. His aged face was full of worry. He had chased after Zhang Juji earlier, but he had been stopped by 2 surges of the Sky Demon's will. Although he had managed to severely injure the demonic figure from thousands of miles away, he had still managed to escape in the end. Furthermore, when the Daotian Prefecture master rushed back to the Divine Cave, he discovered that not only had the demonic bone been stolen, but the Azure Dragon's meridian had also disappeared without a trace. Prefecture Master? The entire hall was dead silent. At this moment, all the elites of the Azure Sky sect had a grave and fearful expression on their faces. First, it was the Demon Clan. Now, it was the Ghost Clan. Now, there was a human elite who had colluded with the Sky Demon to create a diversion. No one knew what they were up to. The banquet of the human clan was a gathering of all sorts of evil spirits. Inexplicably, many people turned to look at the young man in black who was standing in front of the hall with his hands behind his back. It turned out that Master Ling Xiao had been shouldering unimaginable pressure all this while. Whether it was Lu Ming, Yang Yuan, or Zhang Heba, their talents and cultivation levels were top-notch. Even young Master Wu of the Azure Sky sect had been easily killed by the evil spirit in the sacred ground of the academy. One could only imagine the dangers Lord Ling Xiao had been through in places that they could not see. It was just that the young master was righteous and had never mentioned it in front of anyone. Thus, it had given them the illusion that it was easy. However, after witnessing the evil spirit's means today, everyone finally understood that the title of the human emperor was a supreme honor, but it was also a great danger. The young master was righteous. This is the end of the lecture. You may return to the sect today, but the Daotian Prefecture master took a deep breath and looked at Ling Xiao with a grave expression. It's best to travel together or order the sect to send powerful cultivators to receive you. This, upon hearing that, everyone was shocked. Soon, they understood the deeper meaning of the prefecture master's words. It was obvious that the mansion master had failed to kill that demon. It was hard to imagine that even a saint of the human race could not suppress the demons. Soon, the entire Azure Sky world would face true chaos. Yes, Manor Head. Everyone bowed, but the Dao Heaven Manor Lord had already disappeared from the stage. Young Master Xianyuan Weiyang and the other 2 girls gathered around Ling Xiao, their eyes filled with fear. Especially Yu Yi's move just now, rain falls 3,000 killing intent, rain stops, saber breaks blue sea. That kind of murderous aura was truly shocking and terrifying. Let's go back to Ling people first. Ling Zhao's eyes were heavy, and even his tone carried a rare touch of vicissitudes. Young Master. Right at this moment, Jean Han suddenly pursed her red lips and hesitated to speak. If you have something to say, feel free to say it. Young Master Han wants to return to the Golden Crow Divine Dynasty to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. After witnessing Gu Chaoxiai's incredible talent, Jean Han had lost her former pride. Compared to Gu Chaoxiai, her appearance, cultivation, and talent were all inferior. If she did not cultivate diligently, she was afraid that soon she would not even be qualified to stand beside her young master. The Golden Crow Divine Dynasty had an ancestral land, and there was a wisp of the sun's true source left behind by their ancestors. Originally, this item was the inheritance of the Divine Dynasty, and it was used to protect the dynasty's fate. However, now that the 4 divine dynasties had all submitted to her young master, there was no such thing as the dynasty's fate. As long as she could integrate this wisp of true source into her body, she might be able to enter the saint realm, which would be a great help to her young master. Just in a few days, I will also be cultivating in seclusion for a period of time. Ling Xiao nodded slightly, not surprised at all. He naturally knew what the Golden Crow eldest princess was thinking. However, how could a lady of Providence with less than 10,000 Providence be compared to Gu Chaoxiai? In the end, she was just looking for humiliation because she was too arrogant. When I reach the Saint Realm, I will return to serve you, young master. Jean Han took a deep breath, and her bright golden eyes were filled with tears. She turned and flew down the mountain. Ba, Miss Jean is also a sentimental person. Yao Guang shook his head and sighed softly, chanting the name of Buddha. Let's go. Ling Xiao smiled, but there was not a trace of emotion in his eyes. This trip to the academy had come to a successful conclusion. However, Ling Xiao was slightly surprised that Yi Qingchan did not come as promised. Given her temperament, she would not deliberately miss the appointment. It could only be that there was a problem in her seclusion. Of course, according to her providence, this problem was most likely due to her providence. When the three of them walked out of the hall, they saw a beautiful figure in white standing in front of the mountain path in the distance. Her hands were clenched tightly in front of her, and her face was obviously haggard. To be honest, until now, Li Jichu could not figure out why her little junior brother was a spy of the Ghost Clan. In other words, if he had not given him such a vague attitude back then, would he not have become jealous of young Master Ling Xiao and made such a huge mistake? In her heart, Li Jichu was still willing to believe that even though her little junior brother was from the Ghost Clan, he was not a treacherous and evil person. However, after all, they had parted ways and met again. Senior sister Li? It was only when she heard a gentle and clear voice that Li Jichu woke up from her deep thoughts. When she looked up again, that unparalleled immortal face was already in front of her. Even though she was already familiar with Ling Xiao, every time she saw this face, her heart would still beat faster, and she would not stop for a long time. Young master, senior sister, are you waiting for me? Ling Xiao had a gentle smile on his face. He did not seem to blame Lu Ming at all. Yes, there have been many unforeseen events in the Daotian Academy these few days. Young master, you must have been frightened. Li Jichu pursed her red lips tightly, looking a little shy, as if she did not dare to look directly into the young man's eyes. Senior sister, you are treating me as an outsider. The demons are rampant and it makes one's hair stand on end. From today onwards, I will work hard on my cultivation as well. I hope that one day, I will be able to stand side by side with senior sister and slay the demons. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. However, Li Jichu's eyes trembled slightly and a faint smile appeared at the corners of her lips. Young master. Good. I will also work hard on my cultivation and look forward to seeing you again. Here is some morality wine. I saw that you liked it, so I asked Master for some. At this moment, the haze in Li Jichu's heart dissipated. Even her eyes were filled with a touch of moving radiance. Thank you, Senior Sister Li. Senior Sister, we will meet again. Ling Xiao bowed slightly and took the few jars of wine. The moment he took a step forward, he disappeared in a flash. Behind him, Xianyuan Weiyang and Yao Guang followed closely. The mountain wind whistled and the sun was hanging in the west. The sunset glow on the horizon was extremely dazzling, but it dimmed in an instant. Under the setting sun, the beautiful figure in white looked sorrowful. She shook her head and smiled bitterly. In the end, she had lost everything. They were just friends. Lord Ling Xiao, you are close to me. I can only meet you by chance. I can only find you by chance. Since that day, when we parted at the mountain of Tao, the mountains and rivers are far and wide. The human world is filled with stars. None of them are you. None of them are not you. The Buddha's sea shone brightly. The extreme north is desolate. Demons and ghosts run amok. I have returned to my homeland. I will go north to slay the barbarians. I will go south to slay the demons. The righteousness is my will. At the foot of the mountain of Tao, Ling Xiao suddenly stopped in his tracks. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. In the ancient forest at the foot of the mountain, a slender and handsome young man in black stood quietly. His expression was calm and indifferent. Have you thought it through? Ling Xiao said indifferently. However, Ning Chuan suddenly bowed and said in a humble manner, Greetings, young master. Beep. The chosen one is in awe. He has acknowledged his allegiance. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 15,000 luck points and 15,000 villain points. Beep. The chosen one is in awe. Congratulations to the host for obtaining an additional reward. The ancient universe formation. It can combine thousands of formations to imprison any living being whose cultivation is one realm higher than the host's. Chapter 1269. The Ancient Universe Formation? Ling Zhao's eyes were cold, and the smile on his face grew wider. In his eyes, the colors of yin and yang circulated, forming the 6 paths of the universe. It was mysterious and unfathomable. Of course, compared to these rewards, Ling Xiao cared more about Ning Chuan's submission. Now that the situation in Qing Tsang was chaotic, he had many arrangements to make. He couldn't do everything himself. Ning Chuan was a madman with terrifying luck and a desire to kill. He was more suitable to be his blade. It was difficult for one person to reach the end of this journey. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Ling Xiao had a feeling that there was a pair of eyes above his head that were constantly watching him. Master Ling Xiao. Just as Ling Xiao lifted his foot and was about to walk towards Tianhou, another soft cry sounded from the ancient path behind him. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and turned around. He saw the Princess Royal Wu Hongxian and Xin Jing walking side by side. Although their faces were pale, they were smiling brightly. Princess Royal, Ling Xiao said indifferently. In his impression, he didn't seem to have any connection with this eldest princess. Why did she call out to him at this moment? Young master, are you planning to return to the deity battlefield? Wu Hongxian looked at Yao Guang with a complicated expression, which surprised Ling Xiao. Princess Royal, please speak your mind. There are 7 days until my wedding with Jing'an. I would like to invite young master, Yao Guang, and Princess Xianyuan to the Shenwu dynasty as guests. Wu Hongxian smiled bitterly and looked at Ling Xiao eagerly. She didn't want to mention it, but, as the day approached, Wu Hongxian felt that she couldn't suppress the coldness in her body anymore. Princess Royal's wedding? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and nodded. Logically speaking, I should go and congratulate her, but if young master is able to grace us with your presence, our Shenwu court will definitely welcome you with open arms. It will be our honor, and Wu Hongqiu took a deep breath, and her face suddenly turned serious. My father will use this opportunity to open the Shenwu ancestral land to reward the marquises and kings. With young master's talent, you will definitely win a seat. Haha, I don't really care about fortune or whatnot. I wonder if your Shenwu dynasty has any good wine? Ling Xiao smiled faintly, but he had some doubts in his heart. This Wu Hongqiu definitely wouldn't have paid such a price just to invite him to attend the ceremony. Moreover, the way she looked at Yao Guang just now was a little ambiguous. Yes. Young master, don't worry. As long as you're willing to come, the fortune wine and the red silk will be arranged properly. In that case, Ling Xiao nodded lightly and turned to look at Yao Guang. Arhut, why don't we make a trip to the Shenwu dynasty? Ba. Yao Guang placed one hand in front of his chest and bowed slightly. In that case, Wu Hongqiu will return to the martial emperor city first and await young master and Arhut's arrival. Cough cough. Wu Hongqiu bowed deeply and coughed out blood from the corner of her mouth. Beside her, Xin Jing'an immediately reached out and held her arm. She took out a white handkerchief from her bosom and gently wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. All right, princess, please go ahead. I will be right behind you. Welcome back to the palace, Princess Royal and Marquis Bloodrobe. In the sky, dozens of soldiers in golden armor immediately came and welcomed Wu Hongqiu and Xin Jing'an towards the east. When the figures disappeared, Ling Xiao frowned and looked at Yao Guang. Arhut and Wu Hongqiu are old acquaintances? Ba. Although I have experienced the mortal world, I do not have any friendship with the Princess Royal. However, Yaoguang wanted to say something but stopped. His Buddha nature rippled leisurely. I can guess why the Princess Royal invited me. Tell me about it. I practice Buddhist magic and am particularly resistant to the evil aura. The Princess Royal has an extremely gloomy aura, like a ghost but not a ghost. She probably came to me because of this. Yaoguang's eyes were deep and Buddha light shone brightly. Above his head, there was a faint statue of Buddha, which seemed to be suppressing all evil. Like a ghost but not a ghost? Ling Xiao looked playful, but he had some guesses in his heart. If Wu Hongqiu had no luck, there might be more to her hidden illness. However, the Princess Royal of the Divine Dynasty did not have much luck, but she had nearly 10,000. How did she fall into someone's trap? Could it be? Suddenly, Ling Xiao seemed to have thought of something. It seemed that the princess's wedding would not be as peaceful as he had imagined. Let's go back to the deity battlefield to rest for 2 days and then set off for the martial emperor city. The moment Ling Xiao stepped out, a golden dragon carriage descended from the sky. Xianyuan Weiyang hugged Ling Xiao's arm and got on the carriage with him. Behind the two of them, Ning Chuan and Yao Guang split into two. Each step was filled with spiritual light as they walked towards the horizon. At the same time, on the Saint Mountain of the Daotian Academy, Mansion Master Daotian stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the departing Azure Heaven elite. For some reason, he felt that everything that had happened today was too much of a coincidence. From Yu Yi's expression, he could easily tell that the Guardian Elder was not killed by him. However, if it was the former subordinate of the Sky Demon who had killed him, how could he have only taken 100 concubines classic? The two events seemed to be closely related, but they were completely independent. They just happened at the same time. Somehow, Mansion Master Daotian had a feeling that all of this was deliberately arranged by someone. Furthermore, even if the former subordinate of the Sky Demon had stolen the demon bone, why was there no trace of the Azure Dragon's spiritual meridian on him? Who could it be? In Mansion Master Daotian's mind, there were very few people in the entire Azure Heaven continent who could be so scheming. Coincidentally, there was only one person in the Daotian Academy who could be so talented. Ling People's young master. He had heard a lot of rumors about this young master recently. He was righteous, and awe-inspiring. He had both the celestial bearing and the talent of a human emperor. However, with Mansion Master Daotian's experience, how could he not see that behind all of this, there was a trace of deliberate planning? Of course, it was normal for young people to be frivolous and to like fame. However, everything in the world complemented each other and was born in opposition. More often than not, the purest darkness was hidden in the brightest places. Mansion Master Daotian knew this very well. However, today, Ling Xiao had been discussing Tao with him in the lecture hall. He had not left for even a moment. With his cultivation, how could he not feel the surging blood Qi Daoist rhyme around the young man? In other words, Mansion Master Daotian did not believe that someone could be deliberately mystifying under his nose. What the hell was going on? Buzz. Just as Mansion Master Daotian was thinking to himself, a low voice suddenly sounded in his sea of soul. What is it? My lord, it was hard to imagine that even with Mansion Master Daotian's status, he still had a look of fear on his face. The demon bone has been stolen. As soon as he finished speaking, a look of intense uneasiness flashed in the eyes of the human race saint. It was as if he had made a grave mistake and was waiting to be judged. Chapter 1270. Oh! However, to the Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion's surprise, the Lord's voice was extremely calm. It was as though he had expected this. My lord, the Azure Dragon vein has disappeared as well. Have you found out what I asked you to find out? My lord, not yet. Find his whereabouts as soon as possible. You don't have to interfere with anything else. The Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion's tense body finally relaxed when there was no more sound coming from his soul sea. At this moment, his eyes seemed to shine with an evil light, and there was a rare hint of sinister viciousness on his aged face. At the same time, 1,000 miles to the east of Tao Mountain, a figure fell from the sky in a sorry state and disappeared into the ancient forest. Zhang Juji's bones were almost all shattered. His aura was weak and his face was extremely pale. When he landed, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Earlier, even though the Daotian Manor's master had struck out with his palm from tens of thousands of miles away, the terrifying might that could suppress the world had still nearly destroyed his body. Even his Dantian's internal organs had been severely injured. Beside him, Yin Yu's face was also pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Boom! Feeling the injuries on his body, Zhang Juji angrily punched the ancient tree next to him. It instantly shattered and crumbled to the ground. This trip to the academy was a great humiliation to him. Not only did he fail to obtain the Sky Demon's remains, but he even left the divine lightning in his body in the divine cave. More importantly, his reputation as a demon had been confirmed. Juji, calm your mind, Yin Yu said indifferently. Her eyes were extremely cold. Senior, Zhang Juji gritted his teeth, but he swallowed the flames of anger that were about to reach his mouth. He could only count on Yin Yu now. It would not be wise to fall out with her now. Moreover, he could not blame Yin Yu for the failure of this mission. The Lord of Tao Heaven Mansion was too cunning. He had set up such a trap to guard the Sky Demon bone. Where are we going next? Let's find a place to recuperate first. I need some food, otherwise I won't be able to fight for a while. Yin Yu's eyes were gloomy, and his heart was full of playfulness. With Zhang Juji as the scapegoat, the Lord would be able to hide behind the scenes in peace and plot against the world. With the power of this young man's saintly body, good fortune could be found anywhere. Of course, the current him was at most a treasure-seeking mouse for the Lord. No matter how many opportunities he encountered, he was merely serving the Lord. Blood? Blood food? Zhang Juji's face froze for a moment before he turned to look at Yin Yu with some dread. He had forgotten that this beautiful young girl was, in essence, a great demon of the 9 heavens. However, if he collected blood for her, wouldn't he? I know what you're worried about. Don't worry, I won't let you kill the innocent. Go find a few evil cultivators or robbers. Yin Yu smiled faintly, while Zhang Juji's expression eased slightly. That's right, in this world there was light and darkness. As long as the people he killed were evil people who deserved to be killed, his Tao heart would not be affected. Senior, then I've killed a bandit in Buddha Pool before. From his soul memory there seems to be such a place in Qing Tsang called Mass Burial Region. It's said that most of the evil cultivators in Qing Tsang are hidden here. However, the terrain here is special, so no one dares to go too deep. Yin Yu's eyes were cunning, and there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. She was a weapon's soul that had been trapped for hundreds of thousands of years. How could she know about such a place? Previously, the Lord had sent a letter asking her to lead Zhang Juji to this place to find a bandit called Chu Liunyan. It was said that this person was related to the accidental death of the Su family's young master in the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance. After all, Folded Shadow did not have providence. Even if he found out some inside information, he still could not find the group of bandits back then. The only thing he could be sure of was that this group of people came from Mass Burial Region. Because of this, even if the Su family spent a lot of money to hire strong cultivators to go to this region to find them, they still ended up empty-handed. With Zhang Juji's good fortune saint body, there would always be some hidden story behind the people and things that he encountered. Putting him in the realm of chaos burial might bring him many unexpected surprises. Mass Burial Region, Zhang Juji murmured and nodded silently. Yin Yu's injuries had to be healed as soon as possible. Otherwise, it was equivalent to him losing a true life-saving trump card. Now, all the ambitious people in Qingtsang were probably looking for him. After all, as long as he killed him, he would really be famous in the world and suppress a generation. Therefore, he had to go to mass burial region. According to Inu, those who lived in this region were the true evildoers of Qingtsang. Killing them was to get rid of evil for the common people. More importantly, this region was extremely chaotic. No one would care about the demonic aura that occasionally exuded from his body. As such, it was indeed the best place to go now. Alright, Senior, let's take a short rest and go on our way. In the end, Zhang Juji nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Qingtsang, wait for the day that I return. It will be time for me to avenge my past humiliation. Buzz. At this moment, thousands of miles away from Dao Mountain, a black-clothed figure fell from the sky. His body was stained with blood, and half of his body was already shattered. Master! A sorrowful cry suddenly came from the forest. Xia Zhimeng and Yang Yuan rushed out of the forest. Their faces were filled with fear and panic. Although Xia Zhimeng didn't really understand his master's cultivation, he guessed that he must have stepped into the Supreme Being level. Otherwise, with the strength of the Lord of the Void, how could he be so respectful to him? However, now it seemed that even if his master lived in seclusion, he still stepped into the dispute of the immortal path because of him, and even he was doomed eternally. Zhimeng. Yui waved his hand, looking extremely tired. For an expert of his level, an arm could be completely healed in a few days. Even if his injuries were healed, it wouldn't be a big problem if he spent some time. However, colluding with demons and killing the guardian elder of the Daotian Academy. These crimes were the real taboo of Qingtsang. However, he couldn't figure out why Zhimeng and Yang Yuan would do such a disgraceful thing with their temperament. Could it be that they were framed or forced to do so? Tell me, what is going on? What did you do in the Daotian Academy? Master, Xia Zhimeng gritted her teeth. The guilt she felt toward her master made her body tremble, but she still couldn't tell the truth. Elder Yu, it's all my fault. At this moment, Yang Yuan suddenly took a deep breath and knelt on the ground. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Chapter 1271. Blame you. Yui frowned and shook his head. Tell me, Zhimeng. Master. Elder Yu, it's me. I made Zhimeng. Shut up. Yu Yi's expression suddenly turned ferocious. He turned to glare at Xia Zhimeng. Today, if that devil hadn't appeared at the right time, he might have died at the foot of the Dao Mountain. Of course, what he really cared about was not dying. Instead, it was Xia Zhimeng's actions. He wouldn't allow this little disciple of his to go astray and fall into the devil's path. Otherwise, even if he died, he wouldn't be able to face her father. When he thought of the white-robed, handsome, and gentle young man in his mind, the anger on Yu Yi's face subconsciously eased. Zhimeng, young people all make mistakes. Tell me what happened. Perhaps there's still a chance to turn things around. Master, Xia Zhimeng's lips trembled. She looked extremely bitter. However, just as she didn't know what to say, a ray of black light suddenly bloomed in the sky. Following that, a black-robed figure with an immortal veil descended from the sky. He looked otherworldly and free. There seemed to be lightning meandering under his feet. Divine radiance surged. Although the three of them couldn't sense the aura of this person, they still felt an inexplicable pressure. It was as if he was suppressing heaven and earth. Who are you? Yu Yi's body instantly tensed up. He shielded Xia Zhimeng and Yang Yuan behind him. It was obvious that this person was coming for them. Could it be that he was imprinted when he fought with the prefecture master of Daotian Prefecture? However, judging from his attire, he didn't seem to be someone from the Daotian Academy. Elder Yu, may I have a word with you? Ling Xiao lowered his head and glanced at Xia Zhimeng. The latter's delicate body trembled. A look of realization flashed across her beautiful eyes. It's her young master. All right. Yui frowned slightly. When he saw the flash of surprise on Xia Jiming's face, a murderous look appeared in the depths of his eyes. No matter who this person was, if he was the one who had bewitched Xia Jiming, then even if his body and soul were destroyed today, Yui would definitely make him pay the price he deserved. You two, wait for me in the forest ahead. Yui turned his head and stared deeply at Yang Yuan and Yi Qingyu. Only when the two of them were far away did he look at Ling Xiao. Speak. Who exactly are you? Elder Yu. Ling Xiao nodded lightly. Just now, at the foot of the Dao Mountain, he had already witnessed Yu Yi's loyalty and uprightness. Furthermore, given the Heavenly Sovereign's intelligence, he had probably already guessed that Xia Jiming and Lin Mingya had been framed. As for his identity, Ling Xiao had guessed from the very beginning. Xia Chen's loyal servant, or perhaps master. However, no matter what, a powerful person like him, who had experienced ups and downs and was now living in seclusion, would definitely not compromise easily. Even if Ling Xiao summoned ancestor Ye's corpse puppet, it would probably be difficult for him to truly tame this upright old man. Yui, just like his name, was admirable. Inexplicably, Ling Xiao thought of those old subordinates who had followed the sky demon to conquer the 9 heavens. The 4 venerables, the 5 emperors, the 7 kings, and the 9 generals. Now, the demon generals and demon kings that Ling Xiao had met were all still loyal and devoted to their master. However, time had passed, and in these hundreds of thousands of years, no one could guarantee that these followers were still loyal. Moreover, as the seal of the Samsara demonic blade was broken, Ling Xiao could see many scenes of the sky demon fighting against the 4 gods. With the sky demon's combat power, he should not have fallen so easily. In other words, since someone could kill him, how could they not have a backup plan and allow him to be reborn? Therefore, it was not that Ling Xiao did not believe in all living beings in this world, but sometimes those who controlled the world hid too deeply, and their methods were too brilliant. All living beings in this world lived without end. Only by jumping out of the samsara and controlling the heavenly Tao could one be qualified to play with others. Since you don't want to reveal your identity, tell me, why are you looking for me? Yu Yi's eyes were cold, and his expression was quite guarded. At this time, he could feel that the young man in front of him was not too old. Since he had the courage to follow him, he must be confident. It's not that I don't want to reveal my identity, but I am not sure if you are still loyal. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, and a wisp of cold light suddenly flashed in his eyes. Xia Jiming, you should be the son of the killing god Xia Chen. You! In an instant, Yu Yi's expression changed abruptly, and his eyes trembled slightly. Obviously, he was shocked by Ling Xiao's words. Who exactly are you? Who sent you here? Although the current killing shrine was hidden from the world, they still controlled the true darkness of the Azure world. The reason why Yu Yi hid in the Void Dao sect was to avoid being tracked by the experts of the killing shrine and to protect Xia Jiming, waiting for the opportunity to reveal the truth of 300 years ago. But now it seemed that even if he hid his identity, he was still exposed. Elder Yu, you don't have to be so alarmed. If I wanted to harm Jiming, perhaps you wouldn't have been able to see her. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. The glow on his face dissipated, revealing his flawless and handsome face. I am the young master of the Ling people, Ling Xiao. I was asked by a friend to avenge a blood feud. Young master of the Ling people. Yu Yi's expression changed again. At this time, he finally understood why this young man in front of him could give him so much pressure. It turned out that he was the young master of the Ling people, Ling Xiao, who went to the void domain that day and fought against the sky demon alone. But what was the matter with the friend he mentioned? Could it be impossible? He had seen Xia Chen's body and soul being destroyed with his own eyes. What exactly was going on? What exactly is going on? The friend you mentioned is. Elder Yue, there are some things that I have to say first. This matter is of great importance. Given the power of the killing shrine, even the Ling clan would have a headache dealing with it. Once you expose my secret, I'm afraid that I will face endless assassination attempts, Elder Yue said. Ling Xiao sighed and said in an extremely serious tone, "So, to be safe, if you want to know the truth after this matter, you have to give up your divine soul and become my slave. Otherwise, you mean?" Yu Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. After pondering for a while, he nodded. He could understand Ling Xiao's concerns. Just like the latter said, although the killing shrine was not a supreme force, even the top forces in the Azure continent did not dare to provoke them. After all, most of the experts in the killing shrine were shadows that hid in the world. Their methods were extremely evil. Even if there were many experts in the Ling people, as long as they caught the slightest chance, it would be impossible for the young master of the Ling people to escape assassination. All these years, he had dragged out an ignoble existence. It was not that he was afraid of death. He really wanted to clear Xia Chen's name and take this force back from the Azure Sun. However, he had no chance to do so alone. It was like an egg striking a stone. Therefore, when Yue thought that he was going to die at the foot of the Dao Mountain, he did not tell Xia Zhiming her true identity. After all, sometimes, hatred would only bring endless trouble. However, Ling Zhao's appearance now gave Yue a glimmer of hope. If this young master of the Ling people was really willing to help Xia Zhiming return to the killing shrine, he would not be afraid even if he had to give up his life, let alone his divine soul. Chapter 1272. How can I believe you? Chilliness circulated in the forest. At this moment, Yue frowned and looked at the young man in front of him. Even though the young master of the Ling people was famous, the implications of this matter were too great. Even Yue felt a deep fear from the bottom of his heart. When Xia Chen obtained the Slayer Emperor's inheritance by chance and created the Slayer Palace, all the experts who followed him were the Slayer Emperor's most loyal servants. However, he was still killed by Qin Yang and Qi Luo. No one refuted them. The reason was because of the bloodthirsty ghost pearl. This evil treasure was the most precious treasure of the ghost clan. When Xia Chen went to the easternmost region to kill the third successor of the ghost clan, he took this treasure out of the ghost realm. If the easternmost region had not been sealed by the realm lord, it would have been difficult for experts to leave. Otherwise, Xia Chen would have been hunted down endlessly. Of course, even so, there were still some young experts of the Ghost Clan who went through life and death situations to cross the seal to kill Xia Chen and bring shame to the Snow Ghost Clan. However, they could not return to the easternmost region in the end. Qi Luo was the only one who knew this secret at the beginning. It was because of Xia Chen's trust that this person and Qin Yang had the opportunity to join hands. The two of them framed Xia Chen for falling into the ghost realm and colluding with the Ghost Clan. Even now, many experts in the Slayer Palace still snorted at the mention of Xia Chen's name. They thought that he had betrayed the Slayer God and the entire Azure continent. Ridiculous. A sect that used killing as its foundation was actually showing the true righteousness of the human clan at this moment. Should they say that Qin Yang and Qi Luo's methods were terrifying, or everyone was greedy and wanted to obtain the Slayer Emperor's inheritance and the bloodthirsty ghost pearl? Elder Yu, you should be familiar with this item. Ling Xiao looked indifferent and waved his hand. A blood pearl turned into heaven and earth and slowly rose into the sky like a blood sun. Instantly, the area within 100 miles was filled with crimson radiance and mournful cries. Wisps of blood-red ripples spread out and devoured the ancient trees and forests along the way. This wave, at Shan Linshin's side, Yang Yuan and Xia Zhiming's expressions suddenly changed. They turned their heads to look at the scarlet blood radiance blooming in the distance, their eyes filled with shock. Junior Sister Xia, your master, can't be a devil, right? Hearing this, Xia Zhiming frowned but did not say anything. At this moment, she really wanted to rush out of the ancient forest and beg the young master to let her master go, but she couldn't do it. This is... Yu Yi's eyes were filled with shock and even his body was trembling slightly. He stared blankly at the blood-red ghost pearl floating in the air, and at the handsome young man standing under the scarlet light with his hands clasped behind his back. In a trance, he seemed to see the young man who went to the ghost domain alone and killed the successor of the ghost clan in the face of tens of thousands of enemies. In the blink of an eye, his daughter had already reached his age. The Slayer's inheritance was unparalleled. If he hadn't trusted that woman so easily and hadn't died a wrongful death, the name of the Slayer would have become a taboo in this era. Where did you get this pearl? This is a sorrowful story. Ling Xiao sighed softly and held the soul-sucking ghost pearl in his hand. His eyes were blurred, as if he was reminiscing. When I came across this pearl, I didn't expect there to be a remnant soul in it. However, at that time, my cultivation wasn't high enough and I hadn't been recognized by the ancestor of my clan. Therefore, I could only cultivate with all my might and hope that one day I could avenge senior brother Xia Chen. Qing Yang and Qi Luo were possessed and actually joined hands to harm senior brother Xia Chen. If it wasn't for the fact that senior brother Xia Chen hid a wisp of his remnant soul into the pearl at the critical moment, I'm afraid this blood feud would have been completely obliterated by time. A few words were enough to move one's heart. Even Yu Yi, a heavenly supreme who had lived for countless years, felt a shiver run down his spine. He was intimidated by the righteousness of the young master of the Ling people. Everyone said that the Lord Ling Xiao was unparalleled in the world. Today, it seemed that the rumors were true. With his status, he could have taken the ghost pearl for himself without caring about anything else. But now, since he dared to take out the pearl, he must be prepared to fight against the godly Slayer Temple and even the Ghost Clan. No wonder. Just now, he said that this matter was of great importance and that he needed to sacrifice his soul before he dared to tell the truth. The soul-devouring ghost pearl. It was because of this ghost clan's inheritance treasure that Xia Chen was killed. At this moment, Yui didn't doubt Ling Zhao's words at all, because even Xia Zhimeng didn't know the names of Qing Yang and Qi Luo. And the experts of the godly Slayer Temple didn't believe that Xia Chen was killed by the two of them. Young master, it's just that the godly Slayer Temple has always been mysterious. Even the Ling people don't know where their sect is. During this period, I've been sending people to find out the whereabouts of the experts of the godly Slayer Temple. In the end, they didn't find anything. Ling Xiao smiled bitterly, and there seemed to be sadness circulating around him. Until I met Zhi Meng in the supreme secret realm of the Void Domain. I see. Yui nodded indifferently. Everything made sense now. But, was the young master of the Ling people involved in today's matter at the Dao Mountain? If so, what was he plotting? Perhaps it's fate. From the moment I met Zhi Meng, I felt an indescribable sense of familiarity and closeness. Although Senior Xia Chen's remnant soul has dissipated, his voice and smile still exist deeply in my mind. It's just that. Ling Xiao suddenly raised his head and looked at Yu Yi in front of him. A trace of guilt appeared on his face. I've looked into Zhi Meng's background before. I heard that she has a master. However, I still have doubts about Elder Yu's current identity, so I've always wanted to meet you. Young master, you mean the matter at the Dao Mountain was caused by you? Yu Yi's expression changed. If it was just a misunderstanding, he wouldn't have any scruples. However, from the Lord of the Dao Heaven Manor, he knew that a guardian elder had died because of this. If all of this was caused by Ling Xiao, no, this is what I feel guilty about. I didn't take good care of senior brother Xia Chen's daughter. As a result, she was used by the demon. Ling Xiao shook his head. Murderous intent surged in his eyes. I really didn't expect that Zhang Jiuji to be so cunning. He would use this opportunity to wreak havoc in the academy. The former subordinate of the Sky Demon is indeed not to be underestimated. Zhang Jiuji. Yui frowned slightly. This name sounded familiar to him. Previously, at the foot of the Dao Mountain, a prodigy from the various clans had mentioned this person. It seemed that he had a close relationship with Yang Yuan. It's the Zhang Heba that everyone talks about. I've fought with him before in the Dao Heaven City. He has the remnant soul of a demon general in his body. He's extremely ferocious and has killed many prodigies of the current generation. I see. It seems that Yang Yuan and Ji Meng have also fallen into that demon's trap. Yu Yi's eyes were cold. It was obvious that he hated Zhang Jiuji to the core. Haha, but it's a blessing in disguise. At the foot of the Dao Mountain, I was fortunate enough to witness Elder Yu's loyalty and sincerity. That's why I followed you all the way and showed myself to you. It's Ji Meng's fortune to have Elder Yu's protection. I should thank Elder Yu. Ling Xiao smiled gently. At this moment, he was talking to Yu Yi as Xia Jimeng Sr. Chapter 1273. You don't have to thank me. I should be the one thanking you, young master. Yui took a deep breath and looked at the young man in front of him. Then, he suddenly bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. Young master is righteous. Yui is fearful. However, the killing shrine might not be as simple as you think. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. He didn't think the killing shrine was simple from the very beginning. How could a force that was hidden away from the world, and whose sect was unknown, be simple? Qin Yang. Maybe he doesn't really want the bloodthirsty ghost pearl. Maybe he wants the inheritance left by the Slayer Emperor. Yui said coldly. When he saw Ling Xiao's blank face, he smiled bitterly and said, Young master, you may not know this, but the godly Slayer Palace can be traced back to hundreds of thousands of years ago. However, it gradually declined after the Slayer Emperor died. It was not until Xia Chen obtained the Slayer Emperor's inheritance and merged with the Godly Slayer seal that the Godly Slayer Palace re-established the sect and attracted many followers. The Killing God Seal? Ling Xiao nodded. It seemed that the key to controlling the Killing Shrine wasn't the bloodthirsty ghost pearl but the Killing God Seal. That's right. The seal was formed by the Slayer Emperor using the slaughter origin. It's seen as the symbol of the ruler of the Killing Shrine. It can only be merged with the Slayer Emperor's approval. So, if I can get the seal, I can take back the Killing Shrine? Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. Normally, when the brothers turned against each other, the immortal venerable would be reborn. Even if the good fortune fell into the hands of the villains, it wouldn't be useful. On the contrary, when the immortal venerable returned and slapped the villains in the face, he only needed to merge with the seal to make the villains betray him and kill him. However, that was how it worked. He still needed to find out where Qingyang had hidden the mark. That's right. However, young master, the Killing Shrine is heavily guarded. It won't be easy to kill Qingyang. It's okay. Since I've promised to take back the Killing Shrine, I won't back down no matter how difficult it is. However, soul ripples suddenly appeared in Ling Xiao's eyes. Elder Yu, according to our agreement just now, even if young master didn't say it, I, Yui, am willing to follow you to death. As long as I can help young master expose the hypocrisy of the two of them, I will not regret it even if I die. Yui gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with determination. After enduring for 300 years, finally the best opportunity to avenge Xia Chen had arrived. With Master Ling Xiao's talent and background, as well as his understanding of the Killing God Temple, Qingyang, Qi Luo, you two are not far from death. A debt of gratitude would not end until death. All right, open your divine soul. Ling Xiao did not pay attention to Yu Yi's Dao heart oath. In his opinion, since this kind of person without luck could not be recognized by the system, the best way to control him was to plant a soul imprint. Only then would it be foolproof. Buzz. A wisp of soul light blossomed from Ling Zhao's eyes in a leisurely manner as a buzzing sound resounded. Yui felt as if there was an additional imprint in his soul sea. Then, it disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. At the same time, a vast memory of the divine soul appeared in front of Ling Zhao's eyes like a picture scroll. Ling Zhao finally understood Yu Yi's identity and origin, as well as the territory where the Killing God Temple was located. Different from what Ling Zhao had guessed, this Yu Yi was neither Xia Chen's master nor his loyal servant. The two of them addressed each other as friends and could be considered bosom buddies. Xia Zhimeng was indeed Xia Chen's blood and bone, but she was not Qi Luo's child. As for the territory where this force was located, it was somewhat out of Ling Zhao's expectations, but it was also reasonable. The heavenly lightning absolute land. This absolute land was desolate, and there were no signs of life in it. It was said that this sea of lightning contained great danger and terror. Anyone who stepped into it would be annihilated by the sea of lightning, and it would be difficult for them to walk out. Unexpectedly, the Killing God Temple was hidden in this sea of lightning. As such, it was in line with Ling Zhao's next plan. Calculating the time, Wu Nye had already been in this absolute land for some time. It probably wouldn't be long before he could find the three Buddha Master's disciples and open the seal in the Thunder region. At that time, it would be time to harvest Yaoguang's Li. Yesterday, Folded Shadow sent news that they had found a key person who killed the Su family's young master, Su Shan. This person was called Chu Liunian, and he was a famous bandit. However, although Chu Liunian was a bandit, he was not an evil person. On the contrary, he robbed and killed the truly evil sects of Qingtsang, and he used the treasures he obtained to help the weak. However, why did he still kill Su Shan when the Su family had clearly sent him treasures back then? Ling Zhao still didn't know what kind of secret was hidden in this. However, with Zhang Jiuji's good fortune, saint constitution, and his providence, even if he didn't deliberately search for the truth, there would probably be people who would come to him for free. Ling Zhao only needed to wait quietly for a few days, and everything would naturally become clear. Yu Yi, you should have some old acquaintances in Killing God Palace, right? Ling Zhao looked up at Lin Shen. Now, Yang Yuan's value had basically been exhausted. As long as he found the reincarnation heavenly abode, Ling Zhao would send him to comprehend the true meaning of reincarnation. On the other hand, Xia Zhimeng didn't have much providence, but she had been planted with a soul seal. Even if Bai Ling was in charge of Killing God Palace, she still needed a few trustworthy helpers. Young master, I do have a few old acquaintances. They were old servants who sincerely submitted to little friend Xia Chen back then. However, I hid in the Void Dao sect all these years and didn't contact them. Now, it's fine. Go to the extreme Thunderground first and see if you can contact them. Don't tell anyone about my identity for now. Ling Zhao said indifferently. He then took out a few medicinal pills from his bosom and handed them to Yu Yi. Heal your injuries first. Yes. Yu Yi took the pills and bowed to Ling Zhao. With the young master's protection, even if he died in the extreme Thunderground, he would have no worries. When Ling Zhao's aura disappeared, Yu Yi turned and walked into the forest. Looking at the girl in front of him, a smile appeared on his face for the first time. Master, all right, there's no need to talk about the past. However, I may have to leave you for a while. During this time, the two of you must be careful. Yu Yi shook his head with a kind gaze. In the end, he didn't let his old friend down. He didn't let his heart down. He had no regrets in this life. 2 days passed quietly. In the deity battlefield, a golden dragon jade carriage descended from the sky, causing waves of exclamations. Now, with the news of the Daotian Academy, the world had a deeper understanding of the loyalty of the Ling people's young master. The human emperor was unparalleled in the world. In less than 10,000 years, the Ling people would welcome a new Azure emperor. Wei Yang, Yaoguang, rest for 2 days. We'll head to the divine martial arts city. Ling Xiao and the others descended from the sky and landed on the sacred mountain in the center of the deity battlefield. Then, Ling Xiao waved his hand and walked into the palace with Ning Chuan. They didn't appear again. Chapter 1274. Buzz! Inside the heavenly palace, two silhouettes descended from the sky and landed in front of the palace. At this moment, shock flashed across Ning Chuan's face. It was obvious that he was shocked by the Tao mysteries here. This is my world. Normally, you can cultivate here and study formations, Qin Wentian said. Ling Xiao said indifferently and threw Ning Chuan a heavenly pouch. When Ning Chuan frowned and scanned the pouch with his spiritual consciousness, his eyes froze. Even though he was the first student of arrays, he had never seen so many treasures, spiritual dawn and spiritual medicines. Ning Chuan estimated that the dawn inside could force him to enter the holy realm even if he didn't cultivate intentionally. Of course, he saw the figure in the phoenix robe sitting in the sky. It was just that with his temperament, he would not be interested in anything other than formations and slaughter. The reason why he was willing to follow Ling Xiao wasn't because of spiritual dawn. It was because of what Ling Xiao called the right to kill. That's right. Only by experiencing real killing can one create an array that can kill God. What his heart desired was to kill. When Ling Xiao frowned. However, when he saw the murderous intent in Ning Chuan's eyes, he understood what Ning Chuan wanted to say: don't be hasty. Soon. Whether it was the burial zone or the world of dead souls that will open in a year, there will be countless battles waiting for Ling Xiao. When the time comes, with this madman following him, it will save him a lot of trouble. Of course, his insanity was an innate talent in martial arts. However, Ling Xiao will teach him how to control it and how to make an obedient blood knife. You cannot hurt any living being in this world. Or else, I will teach you what it means to wish you were dead. Ling Xiao turned his head and gave Ning Chuan a sinister look. Even with this madman's personality, he felt a shiver run down his spine and fear came from his heart. After exchanging blows with Ling Xiao, Ning Chuan's respect for the former was not fake. Out of all the younger generation in the Qing-Tsang continent, the only person that he feared was the young master of the Ling people. It was unreachable and unshakable. Otherwise, even if he yearned for slaughter, it was impossible for him to willingly submit to anyone. Go to the north of this world. There is a blood hall there. In the future, you will cultivate there. Without my permission, you are not allowed to casually step out. After Ning Chuan disappeared into the distance, Ling Xiao turned his head to look at Phoenix Rouge and Su Yan. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. A madman. Don't go near the North Blood Hall. Ever since Xiao Beiji and the 10,000 blood guards died in battle, no one had set foot in that place for a long time. When Mount Ray and Jade Hanyan returned, it was time for Ling Xiao to start preparing for the establishment of a supreme orthodoxy. Su Yan, come with me. Ling Xiao stretched out his hand and grabbed Su Yan's soft and slender hand. Instantly, they disappeared from the spot. Looking at the two disappearing figures, Phoenix Rouge's face suddenly revealed a trace of loneliness. Little ancestor sealed spirit had not appeared for a long time. Ning, and the others had also followed the experts to cultivate. Even Su Yan wouldn't be back for a long time. Suddenly, he felt a little bored. It seemed that it was time to put in some effort to cultivate. Mist suddenly floated and sank around Feng Rouge's body, while Tao markings flickered brightly. Even the space between her brows seemed to have a strange and dark markings that were demonic, strange, and filled with an indescribable aura of immortality. Buzz! In the realm of the gods, Ling Xiao and Su Yan were walking side by side. The mountains and seas overlapped, and the sky and water were a line. Dense spiritual mist and rainbow-colored light covered the horizon. It evolved into golden runes, gorgeous and divine. But at this moment, Su Yan looked a little nervous. She knew that it was time to leave the young master. During this period, Su Yan had been looking forward to being able to serve the young master as soon as possible. Otherwise, she would feel that she was slacking off if she spent all her time with Phoenix Rouge. According to Phoenix Rouge, there were too many dangers in the outside world. Being born meant death. It was better to be a salted fish. But Su Yan still felt that compared to death, losing the young master was a more painful and terrifying thing. I intend to send you to a place. The two of them strolled among the clouds. It was a rare tranquility. I will listen to the young master. Su Yan smiled sweetly. It was time for her to come out and see the vastness of this world. Since she was on the path of immortality, what was stability? The stability she saw was nothing more than the young master carrying the burden alone. Yes, there is a place called the World of Dead Souls in the lower realm. There is an ancient clan with the surname Su. They are a branch of the Sacred Merchant Alliance in the Azure Sky. I will think of a way to arrange for you to enter the Su family. You have to snatch the position of the young master of the Su family in this year. Ling Zhao's eyes were sinister. To him, it was easy to arrange for Su Yan to enter the Su family. As for whether Su Yan could accomplish what he asked her to do in this year, Ling Zhao guessed that it was possible. After all, with Su Yan's luck, even if the spiritual qi in the world of dead souls recovered and a group of people appeared, no one would be able to compete with her in a short period of time. Moreover, Su Yan was very good at business. As long as she was given a stage, she would definitely be able to shine brightly. Of course, even if she couldn't snatch the position of the young master, when this world opened, Ling Zhao had a way to make her the only direct descendant of the Su family. Killing the other direct descendants was the only choice. What else could the Su family do? Yes. Young master. Su Yan's eyes were bright, but she heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was only a year. After a year, as long as she snatched the position of the young master of the Su family, the young master would think of a way to bring her back to the Azure Sky. Greetings, young master. In the Ling people's temple, several black demon guards bowed to the two people who had just landed. Unparalleled killing intent shook the sky and turned into a dragon floating in the sky. In the main hall, a few figures suddenly walked out. The one in the lead was 13th Ancestor Ling Yuanxing. Young master. When he saw Ling Zhao, Ling Yuanxing's face suddenly revealed a smile. He had heard about what had happened in the Daotian Academy in the past few days. He was afraid that the demon bone had fallen into the hands of the young master. But that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that Ling Zhao hadn't revealed a single flaw from the beginning to the end. In fact, with the young master's current reputation, even if someone called him a demon, it would be seen as pure slander. What kind of terrifying means was this? It had been less than half a year since Ling Zhao ascended to the upper realm. However, in just half a year, the young master of the Ling people not only became famous in the Azure Sky, but also became the emperor. Even Ling Yuanxing, if he didn't know the young master's true identity, would be completely mesmerized by this wonderful plot. Unparalleled youth, unparalleled power. 13th Ancestor, there's something I need you to do. Ling Zhao nodded indifferently. The other Ling people elders immediately understood and took the initiative to leave. Young master, that thing, got it? Ling Zhao nodded gently and smiled gently. 13th Ancestor, how is the world of souls that I asked you to seal? Chapter 1275. Don't worry, young master. I've already sealed the entrance to the lower realm, as per your instructions. Ling Yuanxing waved his hand, and thousands of rays of light fell from the sky, enveloping the entire hall. Ling Zhao nodded slightly. He took out an ancient sage sword from his cosmos bag and handed it to Su Yan. This sword was given to him by Ling Yuanxing as the foundation of the Ling people. It was called the Jamba World. It was an upper-grade sage weapon with unparalleled power. However, this sword had a demonic nature, so it wasn't among the top 10 divine swords of the Azure Sky sect. Even so, this sword wasn't inferior to the 3,000 fleeting moments. Yen put this sword in a dangerous place in the lower realm a year later. Ling Xiao smiled gently, but the coldness in his eyes made people shudder with fear. That's right, this sword was the bait he used to lure Xiang Tian from the sword tomb. This contemporary taboo was known as the sword maniac. He didn't resist the ancient sword at all. Ling Xiao placed a divine sense on this sword. When the world of dead souls opened, he only needed to use some means to make this sword release endless power. At that time, Xiang Tian wouldn't come. When Ling Xiao came to the Dragon Abyss Sword Tomb that day, the sword maniac didn't hide his battle intent at all. Therefore, there was bound to be a battle between the two of them. It was related to the title of Sword Immortal. Yes. Su Yen nodded slightly and didn't ask further. 13th Ancestor, please send Yen to the world of dead souls. Then, send someone to smoothly insert her into the Su family. Ling Xiao pondered for a moment and took out a cosmos bag. Yen there are some spirit pills and spirit weapons inside. In this 1 year, try to control the Su family as much as possible. Yes, young master. Su Yen silently took the cosmos bag and walked out of the hall with Ling Yuanxing. At this moment, she was very reluctant to part with him, especially now that Ling Xiao was her only family in this world. However, the path of immortality was eternal. A short separation or a longer companionship. When the two of them walked out of the hall, Ling Xiao looked up at the sky in the distance. In his eyes, purple light flowed and was full of Tao. At the same time, east of the Azure Firmament world, what happened at the Daotian Academy had already spread throughout the entire Azure Sky world. Regardless of whether it was the former subordinates of the Sky Demon slaughtering the heavens' favorites of the age, the Holy Feather race defeating the 100 talents of the human race, or the Ghost race plotting to frame the Lord Ling Xiao, these were all major events that shook the world and caused an uproar among countless sects. One had to know that these three races were the common enemies of the human race and had been suppressed for 100,000 years. But now, they had all appeared one by one. Although those who had acted that day were all from the younger generation, it was mostly to test the attitude of the Realm Lord Palace. Very soon, these three races would truly reappear in the world and contend for hegemony. In the past, the Green Azure 10,000 sects mostly relied on the might of the World Lord to suppress the other sects, and only then could they enjoy the power of the Green Azure. But now, the Realm Master had disappeared and none of the 7 great shrines had appeared. It was obvious that they were powerless to control the situation of the world. Once the Monster Race, Ghost Race, and Sky Demon Race took over, who in the Green Azure continent would be able to stop this calamity? Junior sister, where did your master go? At this moment, on a barren mountain to the east of the Green Azure continent. This place was called the Heavenly Saint region. It was originally a flourishing spirit region. But back then, when the Realm Lord suppressed the Ghost race, he had once fought with the Ghost Emperor in this region. The result was obvious. The two Thearchs, or even existences that had surpassed the Tharch realm, could destroy the world with a wave of their hand. Not to mention, one of them was the most and evil in this world. After that battle, the vitality of this region was extinguished, and the Death Chi was naturally formed. Even the remnant Great Tao aura from the battle between the two strongest existences had formed a restriction that encompassed heaven and earth, and it would not die for 100,000 years. Now, this region was already deserted, and living beings were rarely seen. After all, the Ghost Emperor's aura was not something that ordinary living beings could resist. Once they were tainted by a trace of Ghost Chi, their divine soul would collapse, and they would fall into the Ghost Tao. But what was different from ordinary Green Azure Forbidden Grounds was that even though this place was filled with danger, there were still countless prodigies who came here to train for the past 100,000 years. because it was said that in this region there was an ancient sect ruins called the Heavenly Palace, and there had always been a rumor that as long as one could find the Heavenly Palace, they would be able to comprehend the true meaning of reincarnation and see eternal life. However, 100,000 years had passed, and no one had found the Heavenly Palace. Gradually, no one mentioned it anymore. Brother Yang, are you sure that the Heavenly Palace of Reincarnation is in the Heavenly Sanctuary region? Xia Jiming shook her head and looked into the distance. She saw that the crack in the void was as deep as an abyss, and it was filled with extreme death qi and destructive fluctuations. Not to mention the two of them, even a supreme being expert would not be able to survive if they entered rashly. However, there was no fear on Xia Jiming's face at this moment. Compared to 2 days ago, there was more of a smile on her face. Of course, she was not smiling because Yang Yuan was finally going to obtain the good fortune in the Heavenly Palace of Reincarnation. It was because there seemed to be no conflict between her master and her master. Although she didn't know why her master had left in such a hurry, the fact that the two of them hadn't fought was her greatest fortune. That's right. Yang Yuan flipped his palm, and the mark of reincarnation immediately floated out. There were divine runes on it, and it was filled with an ancient fluctuation. The place that this mark points to is in the center of this region. Junior sister, as long as I can find the good fortune in the Heavenly Palace of Reincarnation. I know, senior brother. Let's go quickly. Xia Jiming nodded impatiently and walked straight ahead. Behind him, Yang Yuan rubbed his nose as a bitter smile appeared on his face. Jiming, you are always like this. You have no reservations about me and you trust me completely. Even if this region is dangerous, oh no, even if this world is dangerous, you are willing to accompany me. What else is there to say? I, Yang Yuan, swear that as long as I find the good fortune in this place, I will not let you be afraid anymore. With that thought, Yang Yuan also showed a satisfied smile on his face. Junior sister's mood has obviously improved over the past 2 days. She must be happy for me. Buzz. It was not until the two of them disappeared that a ripple appeared in the void. A black-robed figure appeared in the void and looked coldly at the spatial crack in front of him. There was not a trace of emotion in his eyes. From the day that Ling Xiao gave the 2 reincarnations to Yang Yuan, the fate of this chosen one was already decided. However, this good fortune obviously belonged to Yang Yuan. Otherwise, with Bai Ling's constitution, there was no way that she could not feel the calling of the Heavenly Palace. As long as he opened the restriction of the Heavenly Palace, he would be able to see the true reincarnation. Now, with the purple Qi pure Tao body accompanying Yaoguang to the Xinwu dynasty, he could focus on harvesting the ripe leek. Time passed slowly, and another day passed in the blink of an eye. At this time, the pure Tao body had already embarked on the journey to the Xinwu dynasty with Yaoguang and Xianyuan Weiyang. On the other side, Yang Yuan and Xia Jiming finally stopped in front of a majestic ancient mountain in the center of the Heavenly Sanctuary. Chapter 1276. Dark clouds covered the sky in the heaven's sacred domain. Cracks that were hundreds of feet long stretched across the sky, blocking the entire sky. The domain was dead silent. There were no signs of life, and the heavenly Tao had been obliterated. At the same time, Yang Yuan and Xia Jiming stood side by side on top of an ancient mountain in the center of the domain. Both of them looked excited. A black stone seal was emitting a dazzling light above their head. Auspicious clouds floated and shone brightly. In front of the two of them, a strange gate stood in the sky as if it was hidden in the sky. Above the gate, Yin and Yang Qi were circulating. It was life and death, and it was an endless cycle. Looking at the gate gave people the illusion that they had experienced the cycle of reincarnation and seen through life and death. I finally found it. There was an unconcealable look of excitement on Yang Yuan's face. To him, this 1 month of time could be said to be a period of great ups and downs, and it was extremely beautiful. Especially now, in order to find the reincarnation divine palace, he even offended the Daotian Academy and became the common enemy of the Azure continent. It was difficult for him to move forward. More importantly, Yang Yuan turned his head and looked at the girl beside him. His eyes were gentle and sincere. "Junior sister, you have suffered. However, the path to immortality was cruel. The strong were respected. As long as he could obtain the fortune of the divine palace, he would definitely stand at the top of the Azure continent. By then, all grudges would be meaningless in front of absolute strength. In this world, the weak were unreasonable. Brother Yang, is this the reincarnation divine palace?" Xia Jiming's eyes trembled. Just the gate alone gave her a terrifying feeling of life and death. It was hard to imagine what kind of mysteries lay behind the celestial gate. That's right. According to the mark, the old site of the reincarnation divine palace is behind this gate. Yang Yuan nodded with a smile. The reincarnation divine palace controlled life and death. It stood in the sky. The reason why people had never found this ruin was because there was no reincarnation mark to guide them. This mark was the key to opening the gate. "Let's go." Yang Yuan took a deep breath, walked up to the door, and gently imprinted the seal in his hand on it. However, just as he took out the scroll of the 100 ladies of the Azure continent and was about to place it inside, he saw the door suddenly release a mysterious light that was boundless and surged into the 9 heavens. A vast and terrifying opportunity had completely awakened. Vaguely, the two of them seemed to see an ancient immortal palace appear behind the door. The sound of Tao reverberated, and auspicious clouds drifted. There seemed to be a myriad of towering mountains, a myriad of flying beasts, and boundless phenomena that rose and fell incessantly. Inside the palace, a slightly illusory figure stood with his hands behind his back, as if he was a dictator. "It's that supreme existence!" Yang Yuan's eyes were filled with shock. He instinctively wanted to hold Xia Jiming's hand, but the latter carefully avoided it. Junior sister, let's go in." According to the strange phenomenon here, it would probably soon attract many prying eyes. And once an expert discovered this immortal palace, it would be a threat to Yang Yuan. "Yes." Xia Jiming nodded calmly and followed Yang Yuan into the courtyard. Boom! Vast spiritual power rippled in all directions. There seemed to be a 7-colored immortal path in front of the two of them that led straight to the peak of the sky, revealing supreme mysteries. At the same time, the void around the door quietly rippled. A black-robed figure stepped down from the sky and disappeared in a flash. At that moment, on the 7-colored immortal path, Yang Yuan and Xia Jiming were extremely shocked. On both sides of the immortal path, a wisp of mystical aura spread out and surged into the Tao. As the two of them stepped out, the space-time in front of them kept changing. It was actually a painting of the past, showing the various forms of life. 10,000 eras changed, and reincarnation did not stop. Gods and demons awakened and were destroyed. Humans, demons, immortals, and demons appeared one after another to control the 9 heavens. However, in the end, their brilliance faded and they were reduced to dust after the destruction of the eras. The only thing that did not change was the constant flow of time and the changes of heaven and earth. For some reason, there seemed to be yin and yang flowing around Yang Yuan, and the universe was in turmoil. At that moment, his cultivation had broken through the shackles and stepped into the range of the 7th stage of the Venerable Realm. Even Xia Jiming had some enlightenment as she walked. Her bright eyes were bright, and her spiritual aura was vast. Until the two of them stepped on the immortal path and stood on the Cloud Palace. There was an additional vicissitude that did not match their age. At that moment, what appeared in front of them was no longer an immortal shadow, but a magnificent palace. The palace was tens of thousands of feet tall, and radiance overflowed in all directions. Even though the two of them had not stepped in, they could clearly feel a fierce and vast aura fluctuating from within. 10,000 Weapon Taoist Scripture. Yang Yuan's eyes narrowed. At that moment, he had already guessed that this palace was probably the heavenly creation he had seen in the reincarnation imprint, the 10,000 Weapon Taoist Scripture. As the name implied, this Taoist scripture retained the Tao comprehension of many powerhouses in the reincarnation heavenly abode, as well as divine weapons. As long as one fused it into their body, they could use it with a thought and turn it into 10,000 weapons to kill their enemies. Let me ask you, in this generation of the Azure Age, who can compete with me? Yang Yuan's eyes were bright, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. But, just as he lifted his foot and was about to walk toward the palace, he saw the door of the palace open with a loud bang. A spirit shadow with 7 colors walked out of the palace. Although his appearance could not be seen clearly, the aura surrounding him could be said to be vast and ethereal, unparalleled and bright. "You've finally come." At that moment, his eyes also fell on Yang Yuan. His 7-colored eyes were like the most mysterious Tao in the world, and no one dared to look directly at him. "Senior, I am the spirit of the 10,000 Weapon Taoist Scripture. I have been ordered by the Divine Master of the heavenly abode to wait here for the fated one." The 7-colored spirit shadow bowed, looking extremely humble. "Since you can come here, you must have passed the Palace Master's test. Fuse with me, and you will become the master of the 10,000 Weapon Taoist Scripture." The master of the 10,000 Weapon Taoist Scripture. Yang Yuan was so excited that he clenched his fists tightly. Just this spirit shadow alone was a heaven-reaching fortune for the people of the Azure Age. Moreover, there were countless divine weapons and immortal blades displayed in this Taoist scripture. But don't be happy too early. As if sensing the excitement in Yang Yuan's heart, the spirit shadow suddenly shook his head and smiled. The 10,000 Weapon Taoist scripture is only one of the 5 treasures. Next, you still need to find the other 4 treasures. Only then can you truly open the divine abyss of samsara and meet the master of samsara. At that time, the mission of heaven and earth may descend on you alone. What? Hearing this, Yang Yuan's expression changed greatly. However, it was not fear, but a kind of shock and excitement that came from the depths of his heart. The 10,000 Weapon Taoist scripture was only one of the 5 treasures? If that was the case, didn't that mean there were 4 more such creations? As long as he could find all 5 treasures, he might be able to obtain the true inheritance of the Master of Samsara and become the new Master of Samsara? Fortune! This was a heaven-reaching fortune. The mission of heaven and earth, the righteousness of the human race. Yang Yuan will not shirk from 10,000 deaths. The means of the Master of Samsara are indeed extremely mysterious. However, just as Yang Yuan's face was flushed red and he was imagining the future, a calm and indifferent laughter suddenly came from the distant void. Chapter 1277. The sky was filled with colorful lights. A black-robed figure walked over from the path of immortality with a gentle smile on his face and a strong spiritual aura around him. Upon hearing the laughter behind him, Yang Yuan's expression froze almost instantly. He turned his head in a daze and looked at the elegant figure slowly walking over. His lips trembled slightly, but he didn't know what to say. Ling People's young master. Why is he here? Could it be? Suddenly, Yang Yuan felt a chill rising from the soles of his feet. The excitement on his face turned into horror. However, Ling Zhao's eyes were not on him at all. Instead, he was looking at the 7-colored spiritual figure and the majestic palace behind it. He could see a trace of Taoist rhyme flowing in the palace and divine runes covering it. In other words, the palace might not be a physical object but a manifestation of Taoist rhyme. Ling Xiao had heard about the legend of the Master of Samsara. It was said that this expert's cultivation was heaven-defying and that he was the true master of the 9 heavens. The era when he appeared was when all races were fighting for the heavens. Human immortals, demons, ghosts, Buddhas, and Asuras all stood in the world. They occupied thousands of territories and fought with each other. This supreme expert of the human clan comprehended the power of samsara and wanted to monopolize the heavenly Tao samsara and become the master of the 9 heavens. However, he fell into the abyss of samsara on the day he achieved his Tao and couldn't step out. It could be said that compared to human Emperor Xuanyuan's tragic journey, this master of samsara could be said to be the top of the human clan. He was truly amazing. The 5 great secret treasures were unique in the world. Even with Ling Xiao's temperament, he felt an indescribable shock when he heard about the 5 great secret treasures for the first time. The treasures left behind by a truly supreme expert of the 9 heavens must be unparalleled in terms of fortune. Just the myriad weapon Taoist scripture in front of him was probably beyond the level of a divine artifact. This trip was not in vain. Ling Xiao's efforts to give the 3 seals to Yang Yuan were not in vain. The harvest this time was really unexpected. Ling Xiao, why are you here? Yang Yuan swallowed hard. At this moment, he already had some guesses. He turned his head and looked at Xia Zhimeng with a complicated expression. There was a rare trace of loneliness in the depths of his eyes. Suddenly, he seemed to have understood something, but it also seemed like he didn't understand anything. He just felt his scalp itch, his heart beat violently, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. Brother Yang, many thanks. Ling Xiao's smile was gentle, and there seemed to be spiritual ripples around his body. Although that spirit shadow had no realm, it gave Ling Xiao an extremely terrifying pressure. If he wanted to obtain the myriad weapon Tao scripture, he would have to first kill it and fuse with it. Yang Yuan, on the other hand, was not a concern. Now, this son of destiny only had a total of 6,000 providence left. He did not even need to waste a providence-stealing talisman to harvest it on the spot. Lord Ling Xiao, I have spent a lot of effort to find this secret treasure. If young master is willing, I can swear on my Tao heart that as long as young master does not interfere in this matter, Yang Yuan will remember your kindness. Buzz! Before Yang Yuan finished speaking, a spiritual light suddenly shot out from Ling Xiao's hand. It was vast and boundless, and it crushed down from the sky. Yang Yuan was stunned, and his eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of anger. But, before he could block it, he saw the spirit shadow standing in front of the palace suddenly step forward and block in front of Yang Yuan. The moment it raised its hand, endless strange phenomena rose and turned into thousands of divine weapons. They directly pierced through the sky and shattered Ling Xiao's attack. Ancient swords, long sabers, great halberds, golden spears, they covered the sky and covered the earth. There was no end to them. Moreover, each divine weapon was filled with a strong holy intent. It was actually a myriad weapon. Looking at the thousands of weapons in the sky, Yang Yuan's expression instantly became sluggish. In the next moment, a trace of ecstasy suddenly surged in his eyes. He did not expect that the myriad weapon Tao scripture's spirit would choose to protect him before he could fuse with it. So this is the meaning of the myriad weapon Tao scripture. Ling Xiao gently nodded, and there was not the slightest trace of panic on his face. Especially the myriad weapon. It was like a scorching sun in the sky, emitting a dazzling divine light. Although the grades of the myriad weapon were mostly in the low-grade category, compared to the majority of the sects in the Azure continent, this kind of foundation could be said to be terrifying. One had to know that even the strong Ling people, in the Qiankuan bag that Ling Yuanxing gave to Ling Xiao, there were only dozens of sacred weapons. It was just that their grades were slightly higher. Suddenly, Ling Xiao had a bold idea. If He could fuse with the myriad weapon Tao scripture and change all the sacred weapons in it to sacred-grade immortal swords. What a magnificent scene it would be! With a wave of his hand, thousands of swords would come out together. Who in the world could stop him? Moreover, the sword bone that Ling Xiao cultivated was a supreme divine ability of the sword Tao. Even if he did not use the aura of the Sky Demon, there was probably no one in the Azure continent who could compete with him. Young man, if you retreat now, I can spare your life. The seven-colored spiritual shadow looked at Ling Xiao with a stern gaze. It was originally formed by Tao rhymes, so it was especially sensitive to aura fluctuations. For some reason, it actually felt a trace of extremely evil and terrifying aura from this young man at this moment. Even it was not confident that it could kill him on the spot. Yes, it was the weapon spirit of the myriad weapon Tao scripture and could mobilize the power of 10,000 weapons. However, in the end, it did not have any cultivation and was only a spiritual consciousness. Once it was broken, it would be completely annihilated. Buzz! However, just as Yang Yuan was looking at Ling Xiao with a provocative expression, a buzzing sound suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. A figure in a black robe embroidered with bloody clouds appeared from the void. Then, without any explanation, it pounced toward the spiritual shadow angrily. With the strength of Ancestor Ye's corpse puppet, even if it encountered a real heavenly sovereign, it could still fight. And as long as the spiritual shadow was broken, the myriad weapon Tao scripture would collapse without any attack. Boom! The void shook and a vast aura poured out for thousands of miles. Although the current Ancestor Yi was no longer as powerful as before, under Ling Xiao's refinement, his corpse puppet became even more tenacious and terrifying. The blue sky suddenly rippled, and countless holy lights fell from the sky like meteors, brazenly slashing toward Ancestor Yi. The amount was enough to destroy heaven and earth, and it instantly drowned Ancestor Ye's figure. One had to admit that the myriad weapon Tao scripture was indeed terrifying. No matter how strong one's physical body was, under the attack of the myriad weapon, it would probably be completely shattered. In front of the treasure hall, Yang Yuan looked at the fragmented space in front of him and felt his scalp tingle. He was inexplicably excited. As long as, today, if he could integrate this Tao scripture, who else in this world could fight with him? Ling people's young master? 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west. Sooner or later, you will pay the price for what you did today. Buzz! And just as Yang Yuan was secretly muttering to himself, he saw the black-clothed youth in the distance suddenly take a step forward, and his figure suddenly disappeared on the spot. In an instant, Yang Yuan felt his entire body turn cold, and even his face turned completely pale. But, before he could make any preparations, an oppressive gust of wind suddenly resounded beside him. Chapter 1278. Boom! A piercingly cold spiritual light quietly bloomed. However, compared to the bone-chilling coldness, Yang Yuan's heart felt as if it had fallen into an ice cellar. He turned his head in a daze and looked at the beautiful and flawless face that was slowly approaching, full of frost. In his eyes there was not fear but disbelief. Beep, the son of destiny's Tao heart trembled. Congratulations to the host for plundering 2,000 luck points and 20,000 villain points. Boom! Xia Jiming stretched out her jade-like hand, with thousands of spiritual patterns in her palm, and fiercely smashed onto Yang Yuan's body. However, surprisingly, the young man's figure did not tremble at all, but his eyes were dull and confused as he looked at the girl in front of him. Why? Yang Yuan's lips trembled as he asked bitterly. However, from the moment Ling Xiao appeared, he had already sensed that something was amiss. However, he still did not want to believe that the little junior sister who had risked her life to save him would betray him. Could it be that all the risks were fake? How could the girl who had led the strong enemy away for him and accompanied him all the way through risks betray him? Buzz. Before Xiaojiming could answer, a loud sword sound suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. Outside Yang Yuan's body, golden light suddenly appeared, thick and vast, and his figure directly rose into the air, clenched his fist, and fiercely punched towards the black-clothed youth who had suddenly appeared with a look of grief and indignation. Why? Boom! A terrifying opportunity erupted, and around Yang Yuan's body, jade brilliance filled the air, and immortal charm rose. At this moment, he looked like a banished war immortal, charging forward without care for his own safety, burning with anger. It's all your fault. It must be you who bewitched Ji Meng. It must be you. Rumble. Under Yang Yuan's fist, the void directly cracked and turned into an endless abyss, like a big mouth, swallowing all the creatures in front of him. It was vast and mighty, destroying the heavens and the earth. Under the burning rage in his heart, Yang Yuan's fist unexpectedly emitted a wisp of aura of nirvanic extermination. However, the instant the fist shadow and the sword light collided, the expression on Yang Yuan's face froze. Then, the golden light around him suddenly dimmed. Even the celestial radiance emitted from his body seemed to have cracked, and specks of light fell from the sky. When did it start? Yang Yuan stood in the void, his hair disheveled. He raised his head to look at the figure that was approaching him. However, at this time, Ling Xiao did not even look at him, and turned towards the spirit shadow that was hiding behind the myriad Tao sacred artifact. Tens of thousands of miles of the void, the spiritual might was boundless. Ancestor Ye's corpse puppet was in a sorry state. Its black robe had long been torn, revealing its blackened skin and flesh. It was like a supreme piece of divine metal. Even after being struck by countless saint artifacts, it still showed no signs of collapsing. Just as the seven-colored divine light flickered in the spirit shadow's eyes, it felt the space behind it suddenly tremble. Immediately after, a silver-white ancient sword with boundless Tao runes suddenly pierced through and slashed towards its head. The seven-colored spirit shadow suddenly turned around and looked at the young man's figure that had appeared behind it without knowing when. A strong sense of fear appeared in its eyes. You can't kill me. If you kill me, you won't be able to obtain the myriad weapon Tao scripture. Is that so? I heard that as long as I fuse with you, I will be able to control this hall. As for whether you have spiritual consciousness or not, what's the difference? Ling Xiao smiled disdainfully and ignored the spirit shadow's threat. On the ancient sword in his hand, tens of thousands of Daos flourished. Heaven and earth froze and time ceased to exist. Purple lightning fell from the sky, and an endless sea of fire burned the heavens. The fear in the spirit shadow's eyes had yet to dissipate when the silver-white ancient sword easily pierced through its forehead, cutting its entire head into pieces. Congratulations to the host for killing the Son of Destiny. You have successfully plundered 4,000 luck points and 40,000 villain points. Congratulations to the host for killing the Son of Destiny. You have received an additional reward, Jade Golden Body. Congratulations to the host for killing the Son of Destiny. You have received an additional reward, Destiny Forging Points 1%, total 62%. In front of the treasure hall, Yang Yuan struggled to turn around and wanted to look at Xiaojimeng. However, as his head turned, his entire body suddenly split open from the middle. Blood mixed with his internal organs spilled all over the ground. It was a ghastly sight. Xiaojimeng's face turned pale. She bent over and retched. There seemed to be a trace of mist rising in her eyes. It was unknown whether it was because of disgust or sadness. The myriad weapon that was originally whistling in the sky suddenly stopped strangely. Then, it turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the treasure hall behind it. The seven-colored spirit shadow's body also dissipated at this time. Billowing spiritual light overflowed and divine patterns evolved. An ancient wave of vicissitudes swept in all directions. The treasure hall buzzed and thousands of soldiers fell silent. In the end, this spirit shadow was just a weapon spirit that had developed intelligence. It did not have the slightest power. It could only use the power of the myriad weapon Taoist scripture as it wished. Just as the seven-colored divine light was about to dissipate, countless Tao patterns suddenly evolved around the treasure hall. They connected into an array and trapped the world. From the moment Ling Xiao appeared, he had secretly used the ancient universe formation to seal this space. He was the son of destiny, and he had attracted such an amazing opportunity. Ling Xiao could not afford to be careless. If Yang Yuan escaped again today, he would be completely out of control. Ling Xiao naturally would not let such a thing happen. The ancient universe formation buzzed and fell, gathering the seven-colored spiritual aura. Ling Xiao's glabella immediately released a ray of divine light. It was like the eye of a demon god that directly swallowed the spiritual aura into his soul sea. In the next moment, his eyes trembled slightly. His palm shone and directly sealed this space into a realm. His figure sat cross-legged in the air. Tao will surged around him, and a wisp of demonic will quietly appeared. At this time, in his soul sea, an aura of reincarnation quietly surged. The seven-colored spiritual aura that he had swallowed condensed into a long river of time. It meandered in the void and flowed endlessly. There was a celestial palace towering in it, with unparalleled divine shadows. Tall and handsome figures woke up from the long river of time and looked down at him. Boom! Thousands of rays of light condensed into a seal. The seven-colored light was dazzling, and it evolved into the vicissitudes of life. With just a glance, Ling Xiao felt the vitality in his body rapidly drain. Even his soul seemed to show signs of collapsing. Backup plan. Very easily, Ling Xiao guessed the meaning of the long river of reincarnation. The master of reincarnation must have set up many backup plans when he left behind the 5 treasures. The mark of reincarnation was only the key to opening this mystic realm. The real determinant of the inheritor was the seven-colored spiritual shadow just now. In other words, if it had voluntarily merged, the long river of reincarnation might not have appeared. If it had been killed by someone, the long river of reincarnation would be the backup plan to prevent the good fortune from falling into the wrong hands. Chapter 1279. Buzz. Ling Xiao frowned as he looked at the ancient divine seal falling from the sky. There was no sign of panic on his face. Instead, he looked a little gloomy. It was the second time. This was the second time he had witnessed the tactics of the most powerful cultivators in the world since he came to the Azure Sky world. If Feng Ling hadn't intervened at the last moment in the Academy's mystic realm, he would have had no problem escaping with his strength. However, he had to bear the risk of being exposed. Even if the Daotian Manor Master couldn't detect his identity, the risk meant that there would be variables. There would be flaws in this game of chess. The river of reincarnation before him was obviously more dangerous than the one in the Daotian Academy. After all, the river was in his soul sea. Ling Xiao had no room to retreat at all. The path to immortality was indeed magnificent. As Ling Xiao's cultivation level increased, he had more schemes. The opponents he faced were no longer just people of the same generation. Even the slightest mistake could cause him to fall into eternal damnation. Boom! Ling Xiao closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Above his head, a demonic sun suddenly rose into the sky. Endless demonic light bloomed. An ancient talisman floated in the demonic sun, revealing an ancient boundless aura. Buzz! As Ling Xiao stretched out his hand, the demonic sun instantly went against the void and collided with the divine seal with a force that could destroy the ancient times. In a short moment, the void cracked and the soul sea tumbled. As for Ling Xiao's soul body, it immediately dimmed for a moment, and its aura became even more dispirited. After all, this was his soul sea. It was a relatively weak place for cultivators. In other words, whether Ling Xiao could break the river of reincarnation in the end, he would probably be seriously injured. This was the terrifying part of this backup plan. The divine seal was shattered, but the spiritual light Taoist rhymes that fell suddenly turned into a heaven and earth prison, enveloping Ling Xiao's entire soul sea. Then, the world fell silent. All kinds of strange images appeared in front of Ling Xiao's eyes. It was an ancient battlefield, and there were countless powerful and ancient figures standing in it. At this moment, their expressions were extremely indifferent as they stared coldly at Ling Xiao below them. The vast reincarnation qi recovered from the horizon, and one could vaguely see an immortal gate standing tall. On the other side of the celestial gate, something terrifying seemed to be sealed. It was constantly trembling and buzzing, showing signs of breaking out of the seal at any moment. However, this resplendent golden door carved with divine inscriptions looked somewhat familiar to Ling Xiao. It seemed similar to the one on Bai Ling's head. Suddenly, a hint of doubt flashed across Ling Xiao's brows. Originally, he had guessed that Bai Ling was one of the most powerful beings in the reincarnation abyss. Once this gate of immortality was shattered, she might be able to awaken her memories, recover her cultivation, and become one of a kind throughout the ages. However, why was there a similar gate of heaven sealed in the river formed by the experts of the reincarnation palace? Could it be that they were sealing Bai Ling's original body? Then, who was Bai Ling? Boom! Boom! Just as Ling Xiao was muttering to himself, the figures in the void suddenly attacked at the same time, suppressing Ling Xiao. The heavenly might was vast and mighty, and the terrifying reincarnation qi crushed the firmament, wanting to destroy everything. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes, and a boundless demonic aura suddenly shot up into the sky. He held the ancient saber horizontally in his hand and slashed out. A ray of black light suddenly lit up, as vast as the stars. It directly tore the sky apart like a torrent of demonic aura, filled with extreme darkness. Ling Xiao's figure was already enveloped by the demonic aura. Above his head, 100 feet tall demonic figure suddenly condensed, and it was pitch black. However, compared to before, the demonic figure's aura seemed to be more solid, and even its face seemed to have an outline. In its eyes, a blood-red moon floated, and it looked down on the world. Boom! Boom! The reincarnation qi could not withstand its power and directly exploded in the sky. The unforgiven demonic armor that originally covered Ling Xiao's body directly revealed its original appearance. Strange demonic runes flowed on the ancient and mottled armor, and the crack that penetrated the chest seemed to be showing the cruelty of the war between the immortals and demons. Ling Xiao looked up at the countless figures in the sky, and in the next moment, he took a step forward and directly turned into a demon. Woo! Heaven and earth whimpered, and the demonic aura surged, shaking the world. At this moment, although Ling Xiao had not completely merged with the demonic bone, he stood there like a sky demon, and his every move was a terrifying demonic aura. Moreover, wherever his demonic aura passed, it made people tremble as if their souls were about to be destroyed. With a thought, the world began to be destroyed. Facing the trap set up by the reincarnation divine abode's elites, Ling Xiao used the demonic aura in his body to the extreme for the first time. His entire body was like a piece of supreme demonic gold, indestructible and destructive. Wherever his figure passed, countless strange phenomena appeared around him. Every strand of his aura caused all things to return to their origin, and the world to return to nothingness. Rumble! A demonic sun totem quietly appeared between Ling Xiao's eyebrows, and the divine aura it emitted was enough to suppress the 6 paths and seal the reincarnation. His figure finally appeared in front of the countless figures, and the moment he waved the demonic blade in his hand, the entire space became completely silent. Tens of thousands of demonic aura burst out, and the dark light covered the light. At this moment, the demon reigned supreme in heaven and earth. The originally surging reincarnation aura quietly disappeared. The countless figures of the elites were also shattered the moment the demonic blade slashed out. In the sky, the reincarnation river revealed its true form, and it flowed endlessly, never changing. Ling Xiao pierced through the void with a single step and entered the river of reincarnation alone. All the demonic aura in his body gathered on the demonic blade, and then he slashed it down. Wu Shuang Dao's resentment. Crack. Time froze and the void ceased to exist. A supreme saber radiance fell from the sky, and it was as if the netherworld sea had turned upside down, and it cut off the desolate era. The reincarnation river also seemed to feel fear, and it derived divine runes and immortal Tao in an attempt to block the saber radiance. But, at this moment, in the sky above the Soul Sea, a demonic sun suddenly soared into the sky, and every strand of light it emitted contained a terrifying suppressive force. Crack! The moment the saber radiance fell, the entire reincarnation river was split from the middle. The mighty reincarnation power poured down, and Ling Xiao's figure was annihilated. However, at this moment, there was no trace of emotion on his face, and instead, there was a faint trace of doubt. He seemed to see at the end of the long river, where the reincarnation power was annihilated, a white-clothed man was holding the hand of a petite figure, and they were walking in the air, and they were getting further and further away. The two of them were covered by divine armaments, and the heavenly Tao did not penetrate them. However, just as the two of them were about to disappear with the reincarnation river, the petite figure suddenly stopped, and she turned around to look at Ling Xiao. On that slightly immature and pretty face, there was clearly a trace of a faint and evil smile. Chapter 1280. By Ling. Ling Xiao stood in the void, and there seemed to be a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. In his soul sea, the sparkling and translucent seven-colored brilliance covered the sky and earth and gradually disappeared. Every ray of light contained the evolution of an era or the past of a powerhouse. Even though Ling Xiao's soul sea was protected by the primordial divine talisman and the ancient Pangu stone, he still suffered serious injuries from such a terrifying power of reincarnation. In fact, in Ling Xiao's opinion, if it weren't for these two divine items, even an ordinary supreme powerhouse would not be able to withstand such a vast aura of reincarnation. However, what shocked Ling Xiao at this time was not the power of reincarnation. It was the two figures walking hand in hand at the end of the long river of reincarnation. From the man in white, he could sense a profound Tao aura that could shake the 9 heavens. To put it bluntly, with Ling Xiao's current cultivation, he would not be able to withstand a wisp of his gaze. Especially the aura that was above heaven and earth and beyond the 6 realms, it was inexplicably awe-inspiring. If Ling Xiao's guess was correct, the Lord of Reincarnation should be the most powerful person of the human race, the supreme existence who had once fought against the immortals and demons. As for the child in his hand, although she looked young and tender, Ling Xiao could still see the outline of her eyebrows. By Ling. However, what Ling Xiao couldn't figure out was why there was a trace of a sinister and strange ripple in her eyes. That wisp of light seemed to have seen through the ages and seen through all ups and downs, unruly and unbridled, evil and indifferent. But looking at her appearance, she was clearly just a child. Who was she? What was her relationship with the Lord of Reincarnation? Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky, and the demonic aura around him dissipated. As the colorful spiritual power sprinkled down, he could feel a clear wisp of spiritual sense coming from outside his soul sea. Obviously, after merging with the power of the long river of reincarnation, the myriad weapons Taoist scripture had finally fallen into his hands. And his spiritual realm had also broken through to the 7th level of the Saint Realm. Buzz! Inside the realm, Ling Xiao's eyes flew open. The space he was in was still the reincarnation divine abode that Yang Yuan had broken into. However, at this moment, this space was enveloped by an invisible force, and all Daos were obliterated. Young master! Not far away, Xia Zhiming was shocked and quickly walked to Ling Xiao's side. She could see that although Ling Xiao still looked calm, the aura on his body was somewhat weak. This was the first time that Xia Zhiming had seen her young master injured and unable to hide it. Injuries to the spirit were much harder to heal than injuries to the body. It seemed that the strength of the seven-colored spirit shadow was truly terrifying. Ling Xiao waved his hand and raised his head to look at the golden palace. With a thought, the palace overflowed with celestial light and turned into a stream of light that entered his sea of soul. Then, Ling Xiao gently raised his hand. The originally clear sky suddenly fluctuated with divine light and turned into a sun. Above his head, 10 divine artifacts floated in the void, blooming with a biting cold light. At this moment, Ling Xiao could feel that with his current realm, he could only activate 10 divine artifacts at the same time at most. As long as his cultivation entered the saint realm, he might be able to use 100 or even 1,000 divine artifacts. However, if he wanted to use the true power of the 1,000 weapons Taoist scripture, he would have to be at least in the supremacy realm. Otherwise, whether it was spiritual energy or physical strength, he would not be able to withstand the power of these countless divine artifacts. Of course, if it were an ordinary genius, even if he entered the supremacy realm, he would not be able to withstand the power of 10,000 weapons. Interesting. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the 10 divine artifacts floating above his head. At this moment, a palace appeared in his sea of soul. As his soul entered, the dazzling array of divine artifacts was even more shocking. Axes, battle axes, hooks, tridents, sabers, swords, halberds, everything. Even with Ling Xiao's temperament at this moment, he felt that it was extremely absurd. He could guess that as an ancient sect, the reincarnation heavenly abode must have a deep foundation. However, he still did not expect that the Taoist scripture alone would be so shocking. As Ling Xiao stretched out his hand, the sword light around him fluctuated. Suddenly, the entire Taoist scripture was filled with hundreds of swords. As Ling Xiao's soul consciousness moved, the great sage Fu Tian, the 3,000 treasures, and more than 10 divine artifacts were all placed into the Taoist scripture. Ling Xiao was not too interested in the battle axes, sabers, and forks. It seemed that in the future, he would have to spend some effort to find some divine swords to replace the other divine artifacts in the Taoist scripture. In this way, when he entered the supremacy realm one day and cultivated the 3,000 sword bones, with a wave of his hand 10,000 swords would open the sky. Young master, congratulations on obtaining such a good fortune. Xia Zhiming bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. At this moment, although her face was filled with joy, there was a complicated look in her eyes. Yang Yuan was dead. Originally, she thought that she would feel relieved and finally be able to get rid of this senior brother who had been raising flags all day long. However, inexplicably, she felt somewhat uneasy. How would the young master treat her? Also, where did her master go? Yes. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. The 10 divine artifacts above his head immediately dissipated. The entire world was dead silent. The reincarnation chi that originally filled this world had already dissipated. Only the 7-colored immortal road that connected to the outside world seemed to prove that this place was originally an ancient land of immortals. Ji Meng, do you know who your parents are? Ling Xiao smiled faintly. He lowered his head and glanced at Yang Yuan's corpse. Then, he kicked him into the deep ravine under the immortal road. Parents? Xia Zhiming's pretty face froze, and she shook her head blankly. Since the day she could remember, she had always been by her master's side and cultivated in the Void Dao sect. In the past, she had asked her master about her background, but her master had never told her. It seems that Elder Yu erased some of your memories in order to protect you. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. Soul light flickered in his eyes. There was an inexplicable vicissitude on his face. Ji Ming, there are some things that I don't want to hide from you anymore. Young master? What is it? You. Actually, your father and I are old acquaintances. What? Xia Jiming's face turned pale. Her delicate body trembled slightly. She had a bad premonition. Father and old acquaintances. No wonder Master would listen to young Master's orders? According to Xia Jiming's guess, the reason why her master had hidden away from the world was definitely not because she was willing to do so. Most likely, it was to avoid a disaster. In that case, perhaps her parents were involved in a blood feud? To put it simply, you were originally the daughter of Xia Chen, the lord of the god of Slaughter Palace. However, your father was harmed by a scoundrel and died 300 years ago. Ling Zhao's eyes were cold. Murderous intent surged around his body. From the moment this force attacked Gu Chaoxiai, he vaguely guessed that there must be a bigger conspiracy behind the god of Slaughter Palace. After all, those who dared to attack Gu Chaoxiai must have thoughts about the Ling people and Ling Xiao. Otherwise, with their current relationship, who in the Qing Tsang Thousand sects would have such guts? Chapter 1281. Killing God Temple. Calculating the time, this faction had only been established by Xia Chen for a few hundred years. Although Ling Xiao had learned from Yu Yi that the godly slaying palace had once been glorious, he had never heard of it before. But how could a declining faction have the courage to provoke the Ling people? In the end, behind young Master's unparalleled righteousness was a supreme overlord that had been passed down since ancient times. Even the Realm Lord and the immortal race couldn't do anything about it. In the entire Qing Tsang continent, how many factions dared to take the initiative against the Ling people and Ling people? The Realm Lord's palace was one of them. The rest were probably the foreign races in the four extremes. Ling Zhao's eyes were cold. With Gu Chaoxiai's luck, it was almost impossible for Killing God Temple to kill her. But who was behind this faction? Also, did this matter have anything to do with Xia Chen's death? What? Killed by a traitor? Xia Jiming's pretty face turned paler, and there was obvious panic in her eyes. Although she didn't have any impression of her parents, the familial ties that came from her blood and bones still made her feel an indescribable pressure. I'm not sure if your mother is still alive, but I've already sent Elder Yu to the extreme lightning ground to scout for information. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the distant sky. I have discussed with Elder Yu. We will avenge your father and take back the Killing God Palace. Thank you, young master. Xia Jiming's eyes trembled, and she bowed to Ling Xiao. By Ling, as Ling Zhao's voice fell, a white figure suddenly appeared from the void like a ghost. Earlier, Elder Yu sent a message saying that some of Xia Chen's loyal servants in Killing God Temple don't seem to trust him enough. By Ling, take the soul-sucking ghost pearl and Ji Meng to the extreme lightning ground to meet with Elder Yu and wait for the right time. Yes, young master. Bai Ling gently nodded her head. Ling Zhao's eyes suddenly flickered with soul runes and transformed into a wisp of clear light that entered Bai Ling's eyes. Xia Jiming and Yu Yi had both been reduced to soul slaves, and Bai Ling had learned the ancient soul assimilation technique that Ling Xiao had taught her back in the Xingzhou continent, allowing her to control soul seals. In this way, with her going to the extreme lightning place and cooperating with Yu Yi and Xia Jiming, they would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. After all, with Bai Ling's karmic luck, ordinary tribulations were utterly unable to kill her. Destroying the Killing Shrine and replacing Qin Yang was definitely not something that could be done in a short period of time. Now that Ling Zhao's divine soul was injured and he had obtained all the demonic bones, it was time for him to cultivate properly and use the Sage Realm Thunder Tribulation as a contract to forge a supreme foundation. The world of souls in a year was the most important part of the journey. At that time, not only would there be a large number of leaks, but a realm that had suddenly recovered its spiritual chi would also contain extremely amazing fortunes. Go, contact me if you need anything. Ling Xiao waved his hand and withdrew the realm power. Bai Ling and Xia Zhiming immediately nodded, bowed deeply, and disappeared. It was only when the two of them were far away that Ling Xiao's mind stirred. He walked out of the reincarnation heavenly palace and retrieved the complete reincarnation imprint at the entrance. After merging with the hidden path spirit shadow, he already knew how to find the remaining 5 great Taoist treasures. This divine soul mark would give him new guidance every time he opened a door to a secret treasure. However, with Ling Xiao's identity, it would be very dangerous to search for the remaining 4 secret treasures. Moreover, the hidden trump card in the hidden path spirit shadow was also a threat to Ling Xiao. Therefore, he planned to hand over this dangerous task to an ambitious young man to complete. Zhang Jiuji. This supreme-grade treasure-seeking mouse was a walking creation. With the strength of his divine body, he could easily find the whereabouts of the other 4 secret treasures. Moreover, Yin Yu was traveling with him, so ordinary tribulations would not be a threat to him. In this way, when he obtained the fortune, Ling Xiao could crush him. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? After all, the chosen one had to go through tribulations and setbacks to grow faster. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao suddenly smiled. He raised his hand slightly, and the 10 holy swords suddenly floated in the void, pierced through the void, and minced the entrance of the secret treasure into nothingness. After doing this, Ling Xiao turned around and was about to leave. But, at this moment, a trace of surprise appeared on his face, and his figure suddenly disappeared. At the same time, in the sky, a slender figure stepped on the sky. Her black hair hung down, and she was crystal clear and noble. There was a kind of majesty that could not be looked at directly in her eyes. Deep and cold, she was like a snow fairy from the 9 heavens that floated into the world. Her white robe was embroidered with the sun, moon, stars, rivers, and lakes. They were like living creatures, surging with the charm of thousands of Taos. She stood at the top of the sky, as if she was the ruler of heaven and earth, overlooking the common people, and she had a kind of transcendence that controlled everything. Young lord, the fluctuation just now should be here. Behind her, the falling star hall master, Lu Xinghe, frowned as he looked at the remaining cold fluctuation in the space before him. It was obvious that someone had just been here. However, with his strength, he did not detect a trace of life aura at all. Could it be that that person's cultivation was above his? Yes. Xue Xian nodded slightly, and there was a faint trace of worry on her peerless face. This territory was where her master suppressed the Ghost Emperor back then, and it had always been strictly guarded by the Realm Lord Palace, fearing that an unforeseen event would happen. Earlier today, there was suddenly a divine light that shot into the sky in this territory, and Tao mechanism surged. Xue Xian stepped into the formation passage and rushed over for several days. However, from the looks of it, she was still a step too late. The ghost race? Young lord, should we seal this territory and search for that person? No need. Xue Xian shook her head slightly, and her white jade-like skin flickered with divine radiance. At this moment, there seemed to be a divine shadow appearing in her eyes, and her entire body emitted a supreme divinity. Elder Xing, I asked you to investigate that little disciple of the Daotian Academy's Confucian Institute. Have you found anything? These few days, rumors about the Daotian Academy were rampant. Regardless of whether it was Huang Luoi's appearance or the appearance of the Sky Demon's former subordinates, Xue Xian did not feel a trace of pressure. However, that spy from the ghost race was a little surprising. Back then, the Realm Lord had dominated the world, suppressed the Ghost Emperor with his own strength, and sealed the ghost race. However, this race was evil and incomparably powerful. Otherwise, with the Realm Lord's temperament, How could he not uproot it? Whether it was the demon race or the sky demon, their foundations were no longer there. On the other hand, the ghost race had been quiet for the past 100,000 years, and no one knew what kind of foundation they had accumulated. Furthermore, the Realm Lord had said that the Ghost Emperor had not really died. Given the means of the ghost race's powerful figures, even if only a wisp of remnant soul had not been destroyed, these 100,000 years would be enough for them to be reborn. No, young lord. Lu Ming from the Confucian Institute has not appeared since he escaped. Lu Xinghe shook his head, and there was a solemn look in his eyes. Chapter 1282. Send the world divine guards to guard the easternmost land. Once you find any traces of the ghost race, kill them all without mercy. Xue Xian's eyes were calm, but the murderous intent in his words made the world lose its color. Above his head, there was a faint silhouette of an immortal stepping on the void, standing tall in the 9 heavens. It was a blurry image of a snow-white god. Although his appearance could not be seen clearly, it gave people a feeling of otherworldly peerlessness. For some reason, this young master of the World Lord Palace seemed to hold a great grudge against the ghost race. This grudge was even several times stronger than that of the sky demon. Yes. Lu Xinghe frowned slightly and nodded. Clearly, he had also noticed this young master's loss of composure. Let's go. In the end, the two of them did not stay any longer. They turned and disappeared. At this moment, in the realm, Ling Zhao's expression was somewhat puzzled. Of course, he was not puzzled by the fact that Xue Xian happened to be here. After all, with the means of the World Lord Palace, it was not difficult to build a few arrays that connected to the 4 extremities. What he was really puzzled by was the anger that Xue Xian showed just now. It was hard to imagine that the cold and arrogant young master of the World Lord Palace, who was as noble as an immortal in the eyes of the world, would show such emotions. Could it be that he had some kind of grudge against the ghost race that the world did not know about? Interesting. It seemed that when he had time, he should go to the ghost race and investigate this matter. He was the son of heaven with heaven-defying luck. Moreover, he was the person who truly stood at the peak of power in the azure sky world. It was not an easy task to eliminate him. However, as long as he was human, there would be a flaw. And Xue Xian's flaw was very likely in the ghost race. Ling Zhao's lips curled into a smile as he lifted his head to look at the beautiful figure sitting cross-legged in the sky. Gu Chaoxiai had already endured this divine tribulation for 10 days. However, the lightning power surging within it did not show any signs of weakening. It would be very difficult for this child of destiny to wake up in a short period of time. With Ling Zhao's current physical strength, if he wanted to enter the Saint Realm, the Saint Tribulation would only become longer. Throughout history, even in the desolate antiquity era, there were countless geniuses, but to be like Gu Chaoxiai, who could last for 49 days in the divine tribulation, was still very rare. However, no one knew how long Ling Xiao could last in this tribulation. Buzz! With a thought, Ling Xiao appeared in the glazed ancient pagoda. Now that Feng Ling had left, the space within the pagoda appeared rather empty and desolate. At this moment, he didn't have to worry that the little girl with a cold expression would suddenly appear behind him and stare at him indifferently while swinging her legs. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He had some guesses as to where Feng Ling had gone. With this girl's means, it was likely that ordinary experts would not be able to do anything to her. Thus, there was nothing to worry about. On the 7th floor of the ancient pagoda, Ling Xiao sat cross-legged. At this moment, demonic intent lingered around him as divine light bloomed. The entire space turned dark in an instant and all light was extinguished. Above Ling Zhao's head, 2 demonic bones floated quietly. Not only did they not have a trace of demonic intent, but they also had supreme divinity flowing around them. At a certain moment, 2 blood-red rays of light suddenly lit up in the darkness. On the two demonic bones, countless crimson gold demonic runes gathered and spread, connecting with Ling Zhao's body. In a short moment, it turned into a black torrent that enveloped heaven and earth, overturning the heavens. At the same time, in the Shenwu dynasty, the imperial dynasty was now decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and it was jubilant. As the eldest princess of the Shenwu dynasty, although Wu Hongxian was not favored by the royal family when she was young, she became famous and became the most powerful princess of the Shenwu dynasty when her cultivation level reached the venerable realm, displayed unparalleled talent, and was engaged to the blood-clad marquis, Shen Jing'an. Now that the two of them were about to get married, all the major sects and forces in the Azure continent sent their elders and disciples to congratulate them. Of course, as the true supreme force in the Azure continent, the Shenwu dynasty had a deep foundation and countless vassals. Just the number of ancient dynasties and imperial dynasties under their control was more than 3,000. Therefore, the martial emperor city was really crowded these days, and it was bustling with noise and excitement. In fact, some of the leaders of small forces were not even qualified to enter the city, and were directly arranged to stay in other cities. In the Azure continent, the wind and clouds changed constantly. At this moment, a golden dragon carriage flew across the sky and landed directly from the sky, causing a commotion. In the past few days, the Shenwu dynasty had set a rule that anyone who wanted to enter the city must enter from the east, and they must be strictly interrogated. But now, not only did the dragon carriage not follow the emperor's instructions, it landed in the city in such a rude manner. It was a provocation to the divine martial emperor's authority. Who dares to be so presumptuous? This is a provocation, completely disregarding the Shenwu dynasty. The punishment should be slap. Just as the crowd was exclaiming and cursing, the few people who spoke first were suddenly slapped away. Several sects' powerhouses coldly looked at the few people on the ground, and their expressions were quite sinister. How dare you? How dare you cause trouble in the divine martial emperor city? A divine martial emperor guard immediately shouted angrily, and clenched the battle sword in his hand, and was about to kill the powerhouse who attacked them. At this moment, a confused murmur came from the crowd. Golden Dragon carriage. That seems to be Lord Ling Zhao's carriage. Lord Ling Zhao is not someone you rotten fish can talk about. Although our Good dynasty is a vassal of the divine martial emperor, anyone who insults our young master will be treated as a mortal enemy by our Good dynasty. Plop! Hearing this, the few people who were about to stand up turned pale, and the moment they staggered, their heads were chopped off by the divine martial emperor's guard. Gulp! Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes narrowed, but they did not dare to have any objections. Who was Lord Ling Zhao? He was the backbone of the human race, the invincible young man who was known as the human emperor. Not to mention the various sects and dynasties, even the Lord of Dao Heaven Mansion, who was a true saint of the human race, once said that the young master was as righteous as jade. It was the martial emperor clan's greatest honor that he could come to the divine martial emperor city. Even if young master wanted to sleep in the martial emperor's chamber today, who would dare to disobey? F***CK. What's that? In the divine martial emperor palace, countless guards stared blankly at the golden dragon carriage that descended from the sky, and they did not know what to do for a moment. After all, in their short few hundred years of life, they had never seen such an arrogant person. Trespassing into the martial emperor's Saint Palace was a heinous crime, and it was unforgivable. However, the golden dragon carriage exuded a supreme aura, and it was not something an ordinary powerhouse could possess. In an instant, the entire imperial palace was silent, and all the guards looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Young master! At this moment, a few people in golden robes suddenly stepped out from the imperial palace's sacred hall and bowed to the golden dragon carriage. The one leading them was the lord of the divine martial emperor palace, Wu Yen. Chapter 1283. Emperor Lord. As the dragon carriage landed, a gentle voice came from the carriage. It was like a gentle breeze that could penetrate one's heart. Then, a tall figure in black appeared in front of everyone. He was the spirit of the bell of creation. There was a faint, immortal light around him. He was ethereal and natural. Many of the imperial dynasty's experts had seen the real face of the young master of the Ling people. But in just a few months, they could feel that the young man's spiritual vigor, Tao will, and ethereal aura had become more terrifying. Even the martial emperor god, a ninth-grade master saint, felt inexplicably terrified when he saw the young man's purple eyes. There was an indescribable pressure. It was too terrifying. He remembered that when he first met the young man, he saw that he was unyielding and loyal. He even dared to fight against two saints for Gu Chaoxiai. At that time, Ling Xiao was not feared by others because of his terrifying battle strength, but his background of the Ling people. But in just a few months, the young man already had the power to intimidate Saint Realm experts. Welcome, young lord. Behind the martial emperor god, the imperial dynasty's officials bowed and did not get up for a long time. Ling Xiao smiled gently and waved his hand. I was invited by the eldest princess to congratulate her on her wedding. You don't have to be so polite. It's the martial emperor god's honor to have the young lord here. Quickly, tidy up my sacred dragon palace and welcome the young lord into the palace. Emperor Lord, there's no need for that. Ling Xiao shook his head helplessly. He felt that the martial emperor god was too enthusiastic today. I've always liked peace and quiet. Emperor Lord, please find a quiet place for me. Peace and quiet? Yes. If you don't mind, I have a temporary residence in the martial emperor city. It's usually used for mental cultivation. Alright, let's go there. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and looked up at Wu Hongxian in the crowd. However, he saw that there was no trace of joy on the eldest princess's face. Instead, she looked even paler and gloomier, as if she had something on her mind. Hongqiu, send young master over personally. The divine martial emperor took a deep look at Wu Hongxian, and the latter immediately bowed. She then led Ling Xiao, Yaoguang, and Xianyuan Weiyang out of the imperial palace. Thank you, young master. After the four of them left the imperial palace, Wu Hongxian took a deep breath and bowed deeply to Ling Xiao and Yaoguang. There's no need to be so courteous, Princess Royal. I'm only here for the fortune in your imperial dynasty's ancestral land. Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent. He didn't try to hide anything at all. But the more he acted like this, the more Wu Hongqiu didn't feel a trace of dissatisfaction. Instead, she acknowledged the young master's character even more. A gentleman is magnanimous, while a villain is always in distress. Eldest princess, you can tell us now why you insisted on inviting us here. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Given Wu Hongqiu's providence, she shouldn't have been targeted in secret and her life force should have declined. But looking at the bitterness on her face, she must have encountered an extremely difficult situation. Let's go to the Moonfall Palace first. You'll understand then. Wu Hongxian sighed softly. The moment she stepped out, she turned into a swan and left. Ling Xiao and Yaoguang looked at each other and followed her. In the imperial palace, the divine martial emperor raised his head and looked at the four figures disappearing into the distance. He seemed to be in deep thought. Go, summon all the unmarried princesses to the imperial palace. Yes, Emperor. Although the divine martial emperor's expression was calm, his eyes were flashing with a terrifying coldness. With the talent and temperament that Ling Xiao had shown, he would be able to stand at the top of the Azure world in less than 1,000 years. The Realm Lord was missing, and the snow-tied cliff alone might not be a match for the Taigu Ling people. In a chaotic world, there would only be one main character. This time, the divine martial emperor thought more highly of the Ling people, or rather, Ling Xiao. Of course, he did not expect Ling Xiao to lose his mind because of beauty. He only hoped that the young master of the Ling people could feel his sincerity. It did not matter if he was a princess or a prince. Since he was born into a royal family, he should be filled with glory and splendor. He should be prepared to risk his life for this glory and splendor. At this moment, Ling Xiao and the other three had arrived at a quiet palace located 100 miles away from the martial emperor city. The Moonfall Palace, as its name suggested. This palace was built on top of a tall mountain. Although it was not big, there was a spiritual pool that illuminated the sky. When the moon was bright, the bright moon in the sky would be projected here. It was as beautiful as the moon falling on the mortal world. Around the spiritual pool, countless divine flowers bloomed, and spiritual trees grew luxuriantly. The sea of divine aura surged like a tide, as if it was a paradise on earth. Moreover, this place was only 100 miles away from the martial emperor city, but the mountain was as tall as 10,000 feet. Therefore, looking down, one could see the endless smoke and fire in the martial emperor city. It made one feel inexplicably comfortable. "Young master Arhat, we're here." Wu Hongqiu waved her hand and dismissed all the maids in the palace. "Eldest princess, shouldn't you tell us the truth?" Ling Xiao walked to the side of the spirit pool and looked at the mist rising under his feet, his spirit might fluctuating. If he guessed correctly, the spiritual pool contained the Jade Sky Supreme liquid. A drop of it could be sold at a sky-high price of tens of thousands of spiritual stones in an ordinary auction house. It could warm one's bones, nourish one's core yang, and flourish one's spiritual vigor. Even the divine martial emperor could not bathe in this liquid all day long. Moreover, this spiritual pool was clean and dust-free. Obviously, it was not contaminated. In other words, this spiritual pool was specially prepared for him by the divine martial emperor. Rustle, rustle. Just as Ling Xiao finished speaking, he heard the sound of clothes falling to the ground behind him. Then, Xianyuan Weiyang's exclamation echoed throughout the Moonfall Palace. "Ah!" Ling Xiao frowned slightly and turned his head to look curiously. At this moment, Wu Hongqiu's outer clothes had fallen to the ground. Only her chest was covered. Her skin was smooth and lustrous as if it was made of white jade. However, there was no trace of seduction on her face. Instead, she looked even more solemn. Ba. Behind her, Yaoguang frowned slightly. Her eyes were filled with Buddha's nature. Divine light flowed like gold. Just as this little monk predicted, the eldest princess has been cursed. Cursed? Ling Zhao's gaze turned cold as he walked past Wu Hongxi to Yaoguang's side. Only then did he see that the back of the divine martial grand princess was actually covered with countless blood-colored patterns. It was like a ghost's face. It was ferocious and terrifying. In fact, as Wu Hongqiu's spiritual light bloomed, the blood-colored patterns seemed to have come alive. They meandered and flowed with evil intent. This is Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. He finally understood why Wu Hongqiu's vitality was so weak. I've been searching through ancient books all these years. I know that this curse is called the Blood Soul Curse. It is an ancient curse that has been lost for a long time. There is no cure in the world. Only the Buddhist sect's Dharma manifestation can slow down its effect. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.